everyone, and welcome back to What a Barb, a Polin podcast. I'm Obs, and this week I'm joined by my lovely Lecky and Veg. Beans is still out there picking up the pieces of her destroyed life. That she's
destroyed life.
Well, what would you describe it as, Lecky?
I don't know.
She's really a trooper, and she's been doing all sorts of life admin, and we love it.
She's hustling her way through.
And listeners have been sending manifestations, they've been sending prayers, they've been sending pineapples, which we recently discovered was a thing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Not actual we haven't had like pineapples delivered to our doors.
No.
But thank you for all the virtual pineapples.
Yeah.
And by the time you hear this episode, sadly not by the time we're recording it, although this episode is just a bit cursed, we've had to postpone recording about 5,000 times, mostly because of me. Apologies. But by the time, hopefully, you're hearing this, it will have just been Christmas. It'll have just been the new year. So happy holidays, everyone.
Happy holes.
Happy Christmas and all assorted other holidays that you may celebrate.
Yes.
2024 is hopefully in the bin. So, guys, because it's not been Christmas or the New Year for you lot, how do you think it went for you?
Right, well, if all goes to plan, I am cooking Christmas dinner this year.
Oh my God.
And let's say it was delicious.
Yeah, why not? Why not? Lecky, how was your Christmas?
Hopefully calm and pleasant.
Last year we had the drops.
Yeah.
I was going to say we can't have anything like that, but I don't know.
My dearest friends, I love you all so very much. I just want to say that Christmas is extraordinarily hit or miss in this fandom.
Yes.
What happened last year did not happen years previously. And believe me, there was a time where Lecky had to beg for me to stay in the fandom because we had such a bleak Christmas. I was like, I can't do this anymore.
That was the dark sex plot of your...
Bleak midwinter, literally.
So whatever's happened on Christmas, because it'll have happened by now, wasn't it great?
Yeah.
Another joy to just be the cherry on top of the year. The year of Polin.
Oh, yes. Google search did like their year in review and there was like a little clip of Polin dancing. That's so adorable.
99% of that will have been us researching our episodes. You look at my search history, it's bleak.
Yeah.
Lecky, you had an exciting visit this week though, didn't you?
Yes. So I've gotten some Polin fan art recently, and so I went to the frame store to get frames for them because I figured I'd get nice frames because I'm probably going to keep them on the wall for a very long time.
At least another couple of months.
To kind of commemorate this journey that we've been on.
I got a bloody tattoo.
Yeah.
And I was kind of hoping that the guy at the frame store wouldn't know what they were from.
It wasn't looking good for you.
I was kind of hoping he wouldn't recognize what it was from. And then at some point he just called me out and he's like, well, in keeping with the period of the show Bridgerton or whatever, I would recommend this frame. And I just died inside. I did admit he's the only person I've ever admitted in real life that I do have a Bridgerton podcast. But I said all of my fan art was gifts from my fellow co-hosts. So thank you.
So frame guy, hold the secret well.
It was actually really funny because he was giving me some options for frames and he was like, this one pulls out his coat. Well, of course I have to get the frame that pulls out the colors in Colin's coat.
I mean, that's the thing. It's like, it's awkward, but also please actually make this as authentic as you possibly can whilst you're at it.
Yeah.
And Lecky so kindly gifted all of us some fan art.
I love it.
Mine ended up all being from episode 3.
Maybe this is your favorite episode.
Maybe it is. And this is the thing, because what a segue, we are on episode 3, Forces of Nature, written by Eli Wilson Pelton. And moving on from Trisha Brock to a new director, Andrew Arn, who takes the reins on episodes 3 and 4, 2 monumental ones. So many, many applause for lovely Trisha, who did such a good job with episodes 1 and 2.
Yep.
And we're welcoming Andrew Arn. So guys, what are your first initial thoughts about this episode going in before we delve into the deep Polin rewatch?
Definitely something I was looking forward to in the lead up to the season.
Yeah. Highly anticipated.
Like the clueless Colin. No, not clueless Colin.
Shooketh Colin.
Yeah,
Reeling Colin. Devastated Colin. On his hands and knees Colin.
Awareness dawning, Colin. Yeah.
That was definitely, it's a highlight of the season for sure. And it's so quirky as well. And there's some really odd moments, but we all, I think, have come to really appreciate them through the rewatches we've done.
Yeah, definitely. I think that I've been on such a journey with this episode because I rated it my least favourite of part 1. I was so hyped for the balloon. And I had this whole world crafted in my head about how that was going to go down or not. Well, go down, go up, which way, whatever it was going to do.
Well, it's not going up.
It's not going up. and then I was just like so like confused. I wasn't even let down. I was just confused by what happened. And I think that really like shaped the way I saw the episode for a really long time. But like, I've come to love it so much. It's so much fun. I think it feels like such a Bridgerton episode, which is really weird to say. But like episode 5, that's a great episode, but it's very un-Bridgerton in some ways.
That's true.
Like the structure of it, whereas like the beats of this episode, and it's light-hearted drama. So although there's a lot of angst, it's not like lives been completely destroyed.
Yeah.
It's funny. Like you say, Veg, it's really quirky. So I've completely changed my mind on it, you know? It's great. And like you say, it's down bad Colin, which is what we'd wanted. And I think it just has like a really comforting, fun structure that's really reminiscent of previous seasons.
Yeah.
I agree with everything you've said. I feel like this was a very highly anticipated episode that didn't go quite as we envisioned, but I love how quirky and just silly it is.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of season 2 in a way, in the silliness of some of the drama and stuff like that. I love it.
And there's a lot of colour to this episode and
Yes.
like ridiculous sets that you'd only find in the show. Before we jump into the episode, Lecky, take us through the breaking crumbs of the week / fortnight / month / whatever is going on.
Christmas period.
Yeah, all of it.
Crumbs of the Yuletide.
Take us through the cruel time yums. Whatever. It's been a really long year, guys. Hello everyone, a much later Ovs and Lecky here. We ended up taking a little bit of a break over Christmas and the New Year, but it's good to be back, Lek.
Yeah, it was a nice break, but yeah, we're very excited to be back and at it.
Well, I hope that you've been on crumbs duty in your time away.
We all have. We chuck crumbs into a little post and then we review the crumbs when it comes time to crumb.
We gather the crumbs, we review the crumbs. In fact, we just spent like 20 minutes before this call talking about The Masked Singer.
Yeah, we probably should have waited.
And a legal defence of Lord Fife. So
Yes.
go to an episode near you.
So, it's been a little quiet on the season 4 front. We know production takes a break for the holidays, but we expect things are just about up and running again. Of course, on Christmas Day, we were treated to photos from the season 4 table read, presumably for block 1 of filming. We were all squinting for clues, but really, it was just so nice to get a peek in at production.
A nice Christmas day on the Bridgerton front. You can't always say that.
Yeah, I think I said we were going to get a trick or a treat. We got a little bit of a treat there. And just to clear things up, there was a recent Deadline article which seemed to suggest that production on season 4 had already wrapped. We're pretty sure this was a mistake, as production is expected to continue until around April, so there's still quite a way to go yet. However, in an exciting piece of news, a fan of the show recently uncovered a piece of casting news confirming that Susan Brown will be appearing in season 4 as Mrs. Crabtree. Without giving too much away for those of you who are trying to avoid Benefee spoilers, Beans, we're talking to you here.
As if she's listening. She might do.
She probably will. Book fans will know that Mrs. Crabtree is a rather important housekeeper at a rather important residence.
We know her from Torchwood Children of Earth.
Yes, which was traumatizing.
Many of us on the pod, our original traumas lie somewhere in Doctor Who or Torchwood.
Yeah. I was going to say Children of Earth was traumatizing. I think pretty much all of Torchwood was pretty traumatizing, but that one was pretty bleak.
I've never recovered from Yanto.
Oh, yeah. And Owen and Tosh, my heart broke.
Yeah. We have it easy on this show. Guaranteed happy endings.
Yeah.
Oh, there was a really sad time that Colin sadly drank from a cup of tea on a sofa. We have it good, guys.
Yeah, and the leads end up together.
Yeah.
Fans have also uncovered that Arthur Lee will be joining the show, playing the role of Richard Gunn, the Earl of Penwood. Again, we won't spoil things too much here, but this is definitely a role to look out for. So welcome to the show, Arthur and Susan. These casting crumbs remain unofficial as of yet, but we're celebrating them nonetheless.
Of course.
Daphne fans, you may be disappointed to hear that Phoebe Dynevor has seemingly confirmed that she will most likely not be returning to the show for season 4, saying in a recent interview that they hadn't called her yet, but she is open to the idea of them calling her in. We really, really miss her and would like to see her back on the show.
I'll be so sad if she isn't back for season 4, because how many times have we said it? We love the family scenes.
Yep.
And it's one of those harder things where we're just naturally going to get less and less of them as the seasons pass. But I think that's where the show is at my favourite. And we didn't get Daphne for season 3, which was really
Tragic.
because they could have been such a great tie in there with Fran and with Colin. I know that people have said that in Benedict's book, Daphne doesn't have such a big role, but I know people are hoping that she returns for season 5. I think even if you just had her in a couple of scenes, you can do a lot with a little, especially someone like Phoebe Dynevor.
Yeah. I think it would just be nice to have cameos, all the siblings. They don't have to be around all the time, but it would just be nice if they could pop in. Obviously, in terms of their schedules and stuff, it may not always work out, but that's what we're all hoping for because we all love to see the family together.
Yeah.
Moving on, we are approaching award season, and very excitingly, this has meant a flurry of nominations for Bridgerton Season 3. We are so thrilled to hear that the cast have been nominated for Outstanding Performance by an Ensemble in a Drama Series at the SAG Awards. Truly such a well-deserved nomination. And of course, we are just so proud that Nicola Coughlan has been nominated for Outstanding Performance by a Female Actor in a Drama Series at the SAG Awards. Amazing news. Jonathan Bailey was also nominated for Outstanding Performance by a Male Actor in a Supporting Role and Outstanding Performance by a Cast in a Motion Picture for his work on Wicked, which we all loved here on the pod. The SAG Awards will take place on February 23rd, and you can bet we'll all be tuning in to cheer the cast along.
Oh, I was so proud of them.
Nicola has again been nominated for her role in Bridgerton, this time for a lead actress in a drama at the IFTA Awards, with the ceremony being held on Valentine's Day.
Well done, Nick.
Bridgerton also received an incredible 5 nominations at the upcoming NAACP Awards. Adjoa and Golda have both been nominated for Outstanding Supporting Actress in a Drama Series for their work on the show.
Whoop, whoop.
Bridgerton writers Asia Squire, Geetika Lizardi, and Lauren Gamble have each been nominated for Outstanding Writing in a Drama Series for TikTok, Joining of Hands, and Old Friends, respectively. The winners will be announced on February 22nd, so best of luck to all. Season 3's art department have also received a nomination for 1 hour period single camera series at the Art Directors Guild Awards, with the winners due to be announced on February 15th. Lots of award shows in February. Bridgerton also won 3 awards in the Digital Spies Reader Awards, with Nicola Coughlan winning Best Actor, Penelope winning Best TV Character, and the show as a whole winning the Best Scripted TV Show. Phoebe Dynevor was also recently featured on the cover of Porter magazine. In the accompanying interview, Phoebe talked at length about her experiences in the industry, as well as her interest in portraying nuanced and complex women on screen. Interestingly, Phoebe cited Daphne Bridgerton as her touchstone, saying, "I mean, it goes back to playing Bridgerton's Daphne. I love that character so much because she was still complicated. She wasn't just this young, innocent flower. She did some stuff that wasn't right, and she was a complex character. I'm always looking for that. I'm always excited when I find that in a role." You can next catch Phoebe in the upcoming movie Inheritance, which will be in theaters from January 24th. AO3 fic writers and readers, pat yourselves on the back because you collectively managed to get Polin to chart at 25 on AO3's year-in review of the most written pairings. As always, fic writers, you keep us going through the wilderness. Thank you. In cast news, it has been announced that James Foon will be joining the company of Much Ado About Nothing at Theatre Royal Drury Lane, playing the role of Claudio. James will be joined by Hayley Atwell and Tom Hiddleston in the production, which marks the second half of Jamie Lloyd's Shakespeare season at the theatre. Are you going to see this? Because I really wish I could.
Yeah, me and Veg are going. We'd already booked this. So the 2 productions got announced as part of the season. I'm going to see The Tempest this week with one of my friends. And then we'd already booked Much Ado About Nothing when it originally came up before the cast being confirmed, because we love Hayley Atwell and we love Much Ado About Nothing.
Yeah, Tom Hiddleston is great too. So James Foon has basically gone all in on Shakespeare this year, but I have to say Much Ado is one of my favorites, so I really wish I could see it, so I hope you guys have a blast.
He's going to be great as Claudio, though.
Yeah. Sam Phillips is currently starring in A Man for All Seasons at Theatre Royal Bath. In, unsurprisingly, Bath. Sam will be playing the role of William Roper in the production, which will run in Bath until the 25th of January before touring venues across the UK. Congratulations are also in order to Rosa Hesmondhalgh, who is joining the writers' cohort at the Hope Mill Theatre in Manchester, England, as part of their 2025 Vignettes program. Rosa's work will be produced as part of Vignettes Letters to the NHS, with performances taking place across April and May. Bessie Carter will be joining her mom Imelda Staunton as the pair star in the West End revival of Mrs. Warren's Profession, due to open at the Garrick Theatre later this spring. And lastly, as you may have guessed from the beginning of this episode, we have a little bit of an ongoing mystery on our hands thanks to The Masked Singer. It came to our attention a couple weeks ago that one of the contestants on the UK version of the show, which is on air now, could be a member of the Bridgerton cast, thanks to a lot of heavy-handed Bridgerton references in the clue segments during the Snail's appearance. The identity of Snail has sent fans, including us, spiraling over the possibility of who it might be. We've been arguing amongst ourselves, debating mostly between Claudia Jessie or Catherine Drysdale, who plays Madame Delacroix on the show. However, it's also entirely possible that the clues are meaningless and the snail actually has nothing to do with the show. Nevertheless, we are heavily invested.
We really are. And as we're recording this, I think it's just been on in the UK. So we've just been trading videos.
But I think it might be Catherine Drysdale. I mean, I did some Googling of her.
She keeps coming back to me like, there's a thing called 2 pints of lager and a packet of crisps.
Some random sitcom I've never heard of, but it kind of fits the clues because I guess her character ended up having a baby, which might have been one of the clues. And she was in the movie St. Trinians, and there's like a schoolgirl clue. I don't know. I kind of think it's her.
And then there's clues today. Come on, they're so dead on. So she was stitching Je t'aime.
Oh, yes. Yeah, she was doing some needlework.
But there's been a lot of frantic Googling, and a lot of people think it's Andrea Corr.
Yeah.
And every time I send a clue to Lecky, all I say is, no matter whether I think it's pointing to Catherine or Andrea, I'm like, damning evidence here, Lecky. We've uncovered damning evidence. I said that today for Andrea, and then 2 minutes later, I sent you a different clue. I was like, this is damning evidence, Lecky. So detectives we are not.
All in all, I think it's an enormous waste of time. If it isn't somebody from Bridgerton, I will be kind of angry at the show just because the clues are so heavy-handed, like we said. But, you know, we'll see. Go listen for yourselves. Go look up the snail and see who you think it is. We'll try to do a little poll. Who do you think Snail is? Oh, we should also mention that we did have to split this episode, which we didn't realize we were going to do. Apologies.
Spoiler alert. I mean, look, it was kind of inevitable. So what you'll cover in this episode, what we'll cover, it was us that didn't. We get up to the Innovations Ball. No, we don't. That's such a lie.
No, we don't. I think we get through Stoll House, and I was looking through because I was taking screenshots for our collages, and I think that's only like 16 minutes into the episode.
I know. Because what happened, we recorded this episode quite a long time ago.
Yeah.
But I had like really bad bronchitis, so we've cut a lot of it out of me just hacking to my death. And yeah, it's only like 60 minutes of the episode. It's because, one, we really, really, really love the dream. I'm not going to sit here and apologise for that.
Yeah, that's true. We spent almost an hour on the dream. Yeah,
We just like chatting about them.
If you haven't guessed now, 63 episodes into our Bridgerton podcast, we can take a topic and run with it for a very long time. So we've been running into that problem a little bit.
Also, episode 3 is great, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
It was so malaligned in my head, but it's one of my favourites.
I think also just it's ingrained in us that for so long we had so little to go on. So we would have like one picture to talk about or an article with the quote. And we would spend an hour or 2 hours talking about that one article or that one picture. And now we have like an hour worth of footage to talk about. And it's hard.
So if you're here for balloon talk, or tent talk, or Colin crying at the Innovations talk, you are going to be sadly disappointed, but we have it all recorded. It'll come out soon. Don't worry. Once again, we're just passing the time. So for now, enjoy your dream.
Some really fabulous balloon puns, honestly.
Not in this episode, mate.
No, in Lady Veg's summary, there's a ton of balloon puns. I'm probably overhyping now, but it's really good. If you like the balloon puns, also put a little balloon in our comments somewhere because Veg did a really good job this time, in my opinion.
So we will cut the episode off. Also, I think Veg was having some issues with her audio at points, so she sounds a little bit funny. We're just doing our best, guys. Happy 2025. Let's go back to the pastas and take it away. Wakey, wakey, Colin. Thank you for that, Lecky. So shall we jump on in? Lady Veg, wherever you may be in the heavens above, can you give us our episode summary?
Fellow Aussians. Oh, sorry. Can you tell I've just seen Wicked for the second time?
Now, I would pay for you to sing this as Glinda.
Let us pick love.
No, the other protagonist.
Jonathan Bailey. Dearest...
The other Jonathan Bailey project.
Yeah,
It's hard to keep track.
Yeah.
Dearest gentle listener, an episode of ups and downs. Colin's thoughts at night and in the daytime are now helium-filled with Penelope, and we can hardly blame him. Though Pen's spirits are aloft due to a visit from Eloise, who apologises and wishes her well, she deflates, as Elle remains heartbreakingly distant. Pen and Cresta fucking Cowper begin to compete to gas up local veggie Lord Doubling, while Colin's horniness and jealousy fly up, and not away. His legs remain grounded as he choreographs the men of the Ton in a rescue mission, inflating his hero complex and saving Pen from a rogue balloon travelling slower than him realising he's in love. Benedict meets a lady and sets himself up for the take-off of his own inflatable. Philippa finds she's got more than just hot air in her womb.
What a sentence.
And Violet's mood is lifted as she flirts with her best friend's brother. Pretty sure that's against girl code, Vi.
Ooh. You know what is against girl code? Sleeping with someone's dad.
Correct, yes.
In Violet's defence.
But they weren't friends then.
It was a different series. It was shondaland.
She was a child. While hiding from the Queen's pick for her Lord Samadani, who is pretty much buying Fran the maternity wear for the 8 kids he expects her to pop out, Fran floats into John, who's much more her speed. Aww. Unfortunately for Colin, things are going well with Pen and the veggie, and some clarity from Violet comes a little too late as Pen and Debbling waft around the ballroom. Uh-oh, Colin, you might have blown it.
Applause.
That was excellent. The number of balloon-related puns.
Incredible.
That was so good.
Thank you so much. I wanted to pay respect to our Lord and Saviour, the balloon.
Thank you, Lady Veg. That was utterly profound. I'm blown away by all of that, babe.
Thank you.
Well, last episode, we had first kisses, we had scandals, we had a boy having a big realisation. Let's jump back in and see how things are going. My oh my, is that wildest fantasy I can see? Because it's late at night. A flame of a torchlight is burning brightly as we find one Miss Penelope Featherington walking through her garden before pausing in a very familiar doorway. Lecky, I'm getting a little sense of déjà vu here. What the hell is going on?
Chaotically picking up where we left off at the beginning of last episode, we find ourselves in Colin Bridgerton's subconscious, which is just a fascinating place to be, honestly.
And you know what? We'd spent such a long time praying for his subconscious, digging in the ground with our bare fingers, trying to free his subconscious, sending out rescue parties for it across every European port. So honestly, it's quite nice to actually meet it for once in all its unsuppressed, resplendent glory.
So, strolling out of the mist as if he's Mr. Darcy himself, Colin comes upon Penelope in her garden, where they last met for a scandalous kiss. Wonder why your subconscious would bring you back there, Colin?
An utterly impenetrable mystery, I'm sure, Leck. Hurry up there, Colin. God forbid you keep Pen waiting, eh?
And as Dream Colin finally reaches Penelope at the very same doorway they shared their first kiss, Dream Penelope turns to Colin and says,
Colin!
Colin!
Good job she didn't say Debbling.
But back in Dreamland, Dream Colin tells Penelope, thank you for meeting me. I apologise for the late hour, but I had to see you immediately. Not only are they meeting in her garden, but it's at his request because he simply has to talk to her. What's on his mind, Leck?
He says, Pen, I've not been able to sleep, not been able to eat. I can barely speak these days. My entire thoughts consumed by... To which Penelope prompts him by saying, by what?
Yeah, Colin, what's consuming you, babe?
By our kiss, by you.
Now, forget 5, and that is rare that I say that. But these are our wildest fantasies coming true right in front of our very eyes. Honestly, it's one of my favourite scenes from the entire show. It's so good. I know it's fictional, but it's still real for us. But before we allow ourselves to fawn over this little reverie too much, there was originally a little bit more to this scene than what we see on our screen. Isn't that right?
Yes, there is. If you watch super closely, as Colin says, I apologize for the late hour, you can kind of see him look past Penelope towards her house as if he's checking to see if anyone's around. It then cuts to a close-up of Colin as he says, but I had to see you immediately. As we mentioned in our recent episodes, there's quite a bit of cut dialogue from the scene. Some of that cut dialogue suggests that Colin envisioned a clandestine meeting with Penelope, and the script for this scene reads, Penelope stands in the spot where she and Colin last met, but this time the night is bathed in a thick mist. Torches light the way as suddenly, in a swirl of fog, Colin emerges. As she does in the show, Penelope says, Colin. But a little moment that was cut is that Colin then said to her, thank you for meeting me. Did you have trouble slipping away? Which is this moment you can kind of see on screen with Colin looking past Penelope. Penelope originally also would have looked back to the sleeping house before answering, I was able to escape unnoticed. The conversation then resumed as it does in the show, where we learned that the biggest victim of the first kiss has been Colin's beloved appetite. But what's interesting about this cut moment is that in his dream, as we'll soon learn, Colin was so enchanted by the idea of Pen sneaking away for yet another private moment in her garden with him that he slipped that into his little fantasy land of the two of them together.
As we'll keep saying throughout the season, Colin has about 5,000 different love confessions. We've already had one, if you count in the apology scene in this very garden, which we absolutely do. But I love this confession so much. It has such like a lovely immediacy to it, where in his dream, he's arranged to meet in the middle of the night because he has to tell her how he feels. Like that's the reason that is so important. It's like a full-on emergency for him, risking everything just so he can tell her that he's been ruined by a single kiss. And of course, we love the shout out to Buck Cullen's infamous appetite, which Luke Newton so bravely championed throughout season 2 and continues to be referenced throughout season 3. You know that if the boy can't eat, he is a goner. But I think my favourite part of this whole little confession is Dream Colin The key word there being Dream Colin, in a state of sleep, confesses to Pen that he has not been able to sleep. Bless you, darling. The sentiment is there.
And of course, Dream Penelope reciprocates Colin's feelings by saying, I feel the same, you occupy my every thought. As the audience, we of course know that Penelope does feel the same as Colin, but as we'll see throughout 303, it's this question of reciprocity that will truly torment Colin. It's not a question of, do I love her, or why do I feel like this, like we see Book Colin grapple with in Romancing Mr. Bridgerton. It's, does she feel this way too? Am I alone in this, or will she meet me in the way that I feel? In fact, the scene description that follows Penelope's line about Colin occupying her thoughts mentions that they share a moment as Colin basks in the mutuality of their feelings.
That's really sweet. I think, as you say, the issue of reciprocity is something we'll continue to come back to throughout the episode, and it's completely ironic because we know how long it's been on the other shoe for Polin. But Lecky, there was originally even more to this scene, wasn't there?
Yes, so last time around we mentioned that the lessons language is revisited in this scene in the original script for this episode. Colin states that he would like to continue the lessons with Penelope, saying, our lessons, there's so many things I have yet to teach you, if you would like to learn. Dream Pen is then overcome by emotion before enthusiastically replying by saying, teach me, which originally would have triggered their passionate kiss.
And what a great bloody kiss it is. I think this one is criminally underrated.
This is my favorite. This is my favorite one, I think.
Guys, what are we doing? I know it's a dream, but it's still real in his brain, and that's all that matters. It's one of the greatest kisses in TV, period. It's one of the paintings that Lecky got for me, like one of the art. It's gorgeous. Amazing. I think that frame of Colin looking down at her just before they kiss, perfection.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite Polin kisses. I think this is my favorite, actually. It's just so good, so romantic. Just the way that they're so overcome, and he pushes her back against the doorway with his like hands braced on the wall behind her.
So she doesn't whack her head, you mean?
Yeah.
And as Colin leans to kiss her, Pen meets him very enthusiastically, with the two clutching at one another as they press against that stone doorway. And as the music soars and the flames get thrown around in the evening breeze, the two of them absolutely go at it, with Pen in particular being an especially fervent partner. How convenient, Dream Colin. And as Colin's kisses trail lower and lower, Pen's breath quickens as we hear her voice whispering his name louder and louder until bam, our boy is awake and looking rather sweaty in bed, to be absolutely honest. Turns out it was all a dream, that classic literary chestnut. What an amazing opening sequence. Before we dive deeper, what do you guys think of this scene as a whole?
So I sat down to watch this episode and really can't emphasize enough just how great this dream sequence is, even with some of the cuts they made. More than that, the transition from the kiss to the dream is just perfection. I think I've mentioned before that sometimes I'll pop on the end of 302 and roll it into 303 because the transition between these two episodes is just so gorgeous and so seamless, which is really a feat when you're considering that both episodes were directed and brought to life by different people. So well done, Trisha Brock and Andrew Ahn. You get all the gold stars in the universe.
Yeah, I think the music is just absolutely stunning in both of those episodes as well. It carries it through so beautifully. It's such a great scene. And I love Luke Newton's delivery in these lines, how he closes his eyes when he goes, Pen, And then we'll come on to it in a moment, but the set is also really cleverly done. Everything is familiar, but really heightened and fantastical.
Yes.
All these cues that something's not quite right, because we'd just been there at the end of the last episode. This is exactly the same place, pretty much beat for beat we'd been. So yeah, shout out to the lighting and the set design teams, because they created this private dreamscape for them, which is just so well done.
It's just gorgeous having him be so immediately open with his feelings. Like, we wondered how we might first hear about them, and we have got the moment with Violet later on, but we were like, oh, because the book, everything's in his head. What's he gonna say? Like, who's he gonna tell? Is he gonna tell one of his brothers or something? And then he literally told Pen to her face in a dream, and it was like, oh my God, what is happening?
Yeah, we thought he would need like a confidant.
Nope, just his own subconscious.
Just himself.
Yeah.
It's interesting, actually, because I think it was one of our listeners made the really good point that, because if you think, who does Pen have as a confidant? Not necessarily for like her issues with Colin, but just in general. And it's like, yes, she's lost Eloise, but she's got Ray there as this really reassuring presence, and she has people like Genevieve in her life. And she's also very self-sufficient as a person as well. But Colin has always turned to Penelope to work through his thoughts about the world. Like, she's his best friend. Like, that's the whole point. And so someone pointed out that it's really hard for him to not have her to go and bounce off of and work out how he feels about something, work out how he feels about the world. So his solution is to dream her up.
Yeah.
Really, really well done. And we'll talk about those wildest fantasies in a moment because it's such a recurring theme that we hoped would pay off. And oh my God, it did. And as we know, because this is a rewatch, guys, no spoilers, we've obviously all know by now, very, very thoroughly, that not only is this entire opening a dream sequence, but it's Colin's dream. I don't think this was a surprise to any of us on the pod, for reasons we'll get to in just a second. But this scene, for the casual viewer, is supposed to be a trick. So we're supposed to think that it's Penelope's dream.
Yeah, so I saw a lot of people that were sort of casual viewers saying on TikTok or whatever afterwards, like, oh my God, I didn't expect it to be Colin's dream. Or there would be like reaction videos of people being like, oh, it's Colin.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah. Not everyone's in it like we are.
Spent 2 years speculating that he would need to dream about her to kind of even things out.
Yeah, I had a list. I think I've had to cut from the script where we'll get to another episode where I like wrote down every reference to fantasies and dreams that have been in the past 2 seasons. I was like, we were always getting here, but it was entirely meant to be a trick, wasn't it, Lex?
So so the script even says, after Colin awakens with a gasp, it says, wait a minute, this was Colin's dream? He's just as surprised as we are.
And one of our lovely listeners from Patreon, Tiffany, also brought this up. And she said that I think we, as in within the fandom, all expected it to be Colin's dream. But had we not known that, do you think you'd have also fallen into that?
I don't know.
If I was a casual viewer.
It's really hard to put myself in that position.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
We're so far down the rabbit hole. I think had I been a casual viewer, obviously you have the background that Pen is in love with him. A casual viewer would remember that for the past 2 years, wouldn't they? But I think would fall into that because what it is, I don't think as a casual viewer, I'd have expected Colin to have completely lost his mind after that kiss.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
As book readers, we know that it breaks him. So we were expecting that kiss to like ruin his life. But I think it's the shock of being like, oh, he's down bad for her.
Yeah. That's actually a really good point because I was going to argue that based on his reaction to the first kiss, they could only have been his dream.
Yeah.
But as you're pointing out, the themes he's saying about how he can't eat or sleep, like that's really far gone. So that almost suggests that it's something that would have been in Penelope's brain. But no, it's just really Colin is that far gone.
That's only chaos, Colin.
So yeah, we might have been tricked.
And then I can't help but wonder, I'm sure little Pen has dreamt about Colin many times over the course of her many years of waiting for him. I wonder, had it been her dream, what would it have been? I think it'd been a lot more chaste.
Romantic, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe like kissing her gloved hand or something.
I was going to say the catch and toast scene because she's like frozen in the moment.
Yeah.
So I bet it'd be something sweet like that. And maybe she's not pulled away by Eloise that time.
Or maybe them dancing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that could be him asking...
Signing her dance card.
Yeah. Oh, sad.
And in her dream, he's like, there you go, Pen. You can add that to the monumental pile of other dance cards I've signed for you every time.
Aww.
That's been our dream. But yeah, I think even Pen would have been surprised.
Yeah.
Had Dream Colin done this in her dream, she'd have been like, oh my God. Well, it's interesting that the discussion about the trick of this being Colin's dream and how we don't really have perspective on that because we're so far down it. But Andrew Arn, the director of this episode, talked about this on the official Bridgerton podcast. He said, we wanted to play up that this was a little bit of fantasy, something that one of our characters is dreaming up. The fake out is that the audiences are expecting this to be Pen's fantasy, Pen's dream. That's such a great way to open the episode. It really shows you where Colin's head is at in a really cool way.
Yeah.
Or not so cool in the case of Colin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think I think it would be a surprise because you wouldn't expect Colin's emotions to be so overwhelmed after one kiss. Whereas this throws the audience, ironically, into the reality of just how far gone he is.
Yeah. I think for the general audience, the fake out does work really well. But for fans, I think Tiffany is right in saying that we all pretty much expected this to be Colin's dream from the beginning. In fact, we really had always expected that we would see one of Colin's dreams at some point in season 3, even before the scene was shown in the trailer.
Yeah, because as we mentioned, the language of dreams and fantasy have been so closely woven throughout the Polin story, throughout season 1 and season 2, and a little bit in season 3. We tracked it in our original Polin rewatches last year, but there are so many moments of both Colin and Pen being associated with that imagery and that language, both in really positive connotations and really negative connotations.
Yeah.
So the writing was really on the garden wall for Colin with this one and his time in Dreamland. I think we'd always suspected and hoped we'd get to see Colin dream of Penelope. It's the perfect payback for his 208 words, because we always know that they always say something at the end of the season that ends up being really, really pertinent to the next season.
Yeah.
And we know the show loves to do that in a really playful way. But I don't think any of us were prepared for just how significant Colin's dreams would be in their story. And this is something we'll obviously come back to revisit in a really profound way in 304.
But beyond our speculation about Colin's wildest fantasies, if you watch the scene closely, the production really cleverly snuck in ways to show that this was Colin's dream all along. They don't just rely on us seeing Colin waking up. In the dream, Colin remains in focus pretty much the whole time, whereas Penelope has a distinct fuzzy quality when the camera is focused on her, hinting that we're in Colin's perspective, and this version of Penelope isn't really with him there in the garden, and also isn't real at all.
Tiny details.
Also, when we see Colin telling Penelope how he's been unable to sleep and eat, he is quite animated in his expressions, whereas if you look at Penelope, she is standing perfectly still, staring right back at him. This difference really shows that we're actually with Colin as he's actually grappling with his thoughts and feelings, albeit in his sleep.
Yeah, and Andrew On also talked about how they wanted to elevate every aspect of this scene to give the audience the sense that this wasn't real life. He talked about how they leaned into the atmosphere of the space because it was such a beautiful location, as I know firsthand. And as we know, this is good old Basildon House, where I feel like I've been more times than even Colin has, to be honest.
And that's a feat.
The amount of times I've traipsed back and forth, going from where the Wi-Fi was, and you guys were messaging me.
Yeah, doing laps.
Can recommend the jack of potatoes there, guys. Okay. And Andrew further elaborated on what production we're aiming for in this scene, saying, "This should feel like a romance novel cover. That's the feeling we want. It's such a great way to open the episode. You've seen the cover, now let's open the book."
Oh.
Definitely does look
Yeah.
like a romance novel.
It's just so soaringly, sweepingly lovely.
Yeah. Also, fun fact for you, they had to contend with a lot of bats while trying to shoot this scene. So forces of nature at every
Yeah.
turn.
That's actually really funny.
I hate bats, so I don't like that fact.
So just when you're there, just imagine the bats.
No, I would not like to imagine that. Thank you.
Yeah, don't go at night. Speaking of forces of nature, which is of course the title of this episode, Andrew On really wanted to capture that theme even from the opening sequence, bats aside. He described this as a turning point for Colin. In a way, it's a parallel to 302, where he meets her in her garden and the two kiss, but where their real kiss was intimate and chaste, Colin's dream allows it to become something more passionate. It's wish fulfillment that you might not have even known you wanted. Talking to Luke, it was about unleashing that force of nature in you, this beast. This is you holding the person that you want. It really sets up the Colin we find in this episode. Once he's realized how he feels, there is no going back for him.
And I think what's so fascinating about this dreamscape is that it's entirely Colin's creation. So from the place that they meet, so he's choosing to go back to that place where they keep on returning to the way Penelope is dressed and styled, all the way through to every single word they both speak, which is really, really important for what Penelope says to him. This is his fantasy. This is his version of Penelope he's conjured up as he's desperately trying to process everything that's happened to him.
Yeah, stealing away a moment with her.
Yeah, he even wants that covert little moment where it's just the two of them, as we'll get to very soon. And speaking of, Veg, how are they both looking in Dreamland?
Dream Pen is wearing an enchanting and intricate gown. I love this look so much as it's so fanciful, which is obviously 100% what you'd expect from something that's in a dream. And the costume designers have really done an amazing job here. People have actually speculated that this could be a combination of several different dresses that Colin has seen Pen in recently. And I tried to sort of pick out what some of those might be. So it's a real amalgamation. Her outfit in the 302 market scene, it's like that. It has a large leaf and flower detailing as well as a mixture of textures. And as a whole, I think the dress has kind of similar vibes to the first Kiss dress, particularly in the structure of it. But then there are hints of other dresses and all this in really heightened fantastical form. So the pattern of the dress reminds me of outfits like the remarkable shade of blue dress and the outfit that she wears on their first promenade. And the colour of the dress in some lights is the seafoam green that we saw many times in episodes 1 and 2, but in the candlelight there's also a gorgeous amount of depth to the colour, which gives rise to some shades of pink, which is also kind of a shade that we see throughout the season, so lovely. And the sleeves are similar to shape to several of her dresses this season, and there are some 3D flowers popping out of the chest of the dress which harken back to the dress that Pen wore to the Four Seasons ball. Overall, a real mix. Colin's brain's confused in many ways, and overall I am in love with the outfit.
No yellow, though.
No,
How much would you be loved if she'd come out in, like, bright yellow?
Oh.
We knew we'd have to give up on that yellow dream.
Oh. He couldn't have given her, like, a yellow ribbon or something.
Oh.
Well, he knows it doesn't make her happy, I suppose.
Oh, that's a good point. That's a good point. But Veg also made a good point about how the outfit seems like it's drawing from a bunch of costumes that we've seen Penelope wear recently. It very much seems like Colin is incorporating recent memories into his subconscious. Not just the kiss, but his earlier lessons with Penelope, albeit in a much more romantic, tangible way, as we can see with that trailing, rather conspicuous ribbon that Penelope is also wearing. And yes, we did in fact name an episode about that ribbon way back when.
Happy memories.
While Colin did not untie the ribbon as we anticipated in his dream, it still seems very reflective of where his mental state is at the moment, with Dream Pen wearing a ribbon that is just begging to be untied.
Yeah, his brain hanging by a mere thread.
Mere ribbon. And what's super interesting about Dream Pen is that this is arguably her least done-up hair and makeup look of the season thus far. And her hair is gorgeous, down and loose, but in a more laid-back way, making her look undone. And as you guys discussed with Erica, actually, on the episode we recently released, Colin speaks about loving her hair down like that, and that's evident in the dream as well.
Yeah.
That's what he gives her, this hairstyle he likes.
Yeah.
And there's no big clips or gems, it's just her. It has always been just her.
Don't all cry.
And this is especially interesting when the real Penelope then goes on to wear her hair up in every single society event she takes part in throughout the episode.
Yeah.
Which is unusual for Pen, which we will touch on later. Her hair makeup look is light and she's not wearing any jewellery either. The fact Colin has cooked this up in his little head as his fancy version of her is Italy, diddly, titillating.
Yes.
She's enough for him without the fancy new look. And she was enough for him before. I am awestruck at her beauty, honestly. So Colin is wearing a piratey vibes coat, but based on some very technical enhancing of the look, i.e. me standing very close to my TV. I think that it's corduroy rather than the usual pirate coat. Can we confirm?
That does look like corduroy. And that would make sense because the jacket he's wearing in the first kiss scene almost has that corduroy texture to it. So if he's taking himself from that kiss moment and coming back to the garden to visit Penelope, that would make sense.
Nice. So yeah, this is also a sort of fantasized, quasi-grounded in reality version of his look. He's wearing a white ruffled shirt beneath a black waistcoat with blue detailing. Heartbreakingly, as highlighted by the great waistcoat analysis by Book Movie TV Worm on Reddit, he wears this same waistcoat in 307 when he's at his worst. We hate this waistcoat and I hate that for him, so I'm choosing to ignore it. Let's move on. His hair is also super glossy and romantic-lead-esque. It's given the book cover and it's perfect also for striding towards her a la Darcy when he's walking across the field to propose to Lizzie the second time. And overall, except for the waistcoat, I'm 100% on board for these looks from both of them. It's the perfect smutty romance novel front cover look, which is of course where our beloved Bridgerton started out.
Well said. One of the most moving aspects of this scene is that it opens to Penelope waiting for Colin. There's a tragic irony here to Colin dreaming of her waiting for him without him knowing that this has been Penelope for the entire time that he's known her. She has always been watching out for a glimpse of him from her home, waiting for him to finally meet her own intensity of feelings she's always felt for him. But Colin, of course, doesn't know how she feels, which is something that is tormenting him throughout this entire episode. The ironic fear that his love for Penelope is unrequited. He is so close to Penelope's truth without even realizing it, and so his mind conjures up what he desperately hopes to be true, that she has also been tormented the same way he has been overwhelmed by the rush of his feelings for Penelope.
And you guys were talking earlier about the cut dialogue in the scene. And I think there's a bigger line that came to light literally in the past few weeks, right?
Yeah, the candle. As I'm sure you'll all know, this was originally a line from Colin where he said, "It is just us. It has only ever been us." For context, this moment would have fallen as a break in the Polin kiss against the wall. Penelope originally would have said, "Teach me," and they began kissing, but the script clarifies that she would have broken the kiss, worried they might have been seen, asking, "Wait, might someone see us?" Colin then tries to assure Pen by saying, "Do not worry, it is just us. It has only ever been us." Then they kiss again.
And as I'm sure fans are painfully aware, this line has appeared. It's almost verbatim, not quite, but it's pretty much verbatim, printed onto a Bath & Body Works recently released candle collaboration.
Yeah. The Colin's Arrival candle.
We've got Pen's first kiss and we've got Colin's arrival. And Penelope's scene on her candle is actually from the carriage scene. So people have thought because of that, does that mean that this line was filmed as well? Since the carriage one was. And like, I don't want to encourage that kind of thing because we got the cut we got for a reason.
Yeah.
And all the choices were made by production for a really good reason. But it's like so in our grasp. And it got as far as whenever they designed the candles.
Yeah, I'm guessing that like Bath and Body Works was maybe sent like approved quotes that they could have used or something like that. So I'm assuming that at some point this line of dialogue, we know it's in the script. I don't know if it was filmed. If I had to speculate, I do think it was filmed for reasons I will explain in a moment. But yeah, I don't want to encourage people to go out and petition for its release. I'm just glad we know it exists.
Oh, officer's back.
Hello, sorry about that.
Hello.
So there has been a very fierce debate and a lot of mourning over some of those cut moments in the dream sequence. But how do you guys feel about them? There's lines about sneaking away, teach me, the embrace, and Colin's incredibly romantic declaration about their relationship.
The candle quote.
The candle quote, as it's now known. I mean, also, what good timing that we saw what that was about, because had that candle come out unexpectedly, we'd been like, what the fuck is this?
When the hell did he say this?
When did this happen?
Was this a dream? The answer is yes.
Can you imagine the chaos? I've got a question. If we hadn't have known where the line was from and you heard that line, where would you have thought it was from?
I would have assumed that I just forgot the line. I would have been like, yeah, fine.
Lecky and I would have been deliriously going through each scene.
The carriage scene, maybe? Either the carriage scene or hilariously in the apology in 301 to make it even more love confession.
Oh my God. I would have assumed he said it in the church dance scene. When she was like, oh no, we can't dance. Aww. So how do you feel about all those cut little moments?
I mean, it's hard to say. Like, I feel like you guys have done a great job.
We have talked about it a few times, to be fair.
You have. I've been listening avidly. I was kind of there while you were discovering it and I had little questions, but it was a lot and I just let you guys get on. So if you didn't hear me and Beans, as well as Beans' life falling apart, it was also because I was just too lazy to catch up with everything and I knew that you guys had it covered. But I think I share you guys' feelings, like the cut that we saw is the cut that was decided as right. We know that we didn't get any massive scenes removed and there were no giant injustices, in my opinion.
So, I mean, first of all, we have the moment where he's like, did anyone see you? I think we can all live without that line.
Right.
But there's a couple of other moments. So, Lecky, how do you feel about those other ones first?
Okay. So I think they get away with cutting the teach me dialogue because it is a dream. But if you ever thought the cut right before the kiss was a little jarring after Pen admits that he occupies her every thought, I think it's because of the cut exchange that we mentioned in our last episode. Because right before this moment, Colin also admits that he's been thinking of embracing Pen again. Originally, he said that his thoughts were consumed by our kiss, by you. And then he added, all I can think of is doing it again, embracing you. So that's why I think we then literally see Polin swept up in an embrace before the kiss even occurs. You see Colin's arms around Pen before he makes his move. And I think that's because they may have actually filmed this snippet of dialogue that was actually cut.
Yeah, and I know that we've sort of just left the lessons behind. Maybe if the lessons continued, this would have played out differently. And a few people have talked about how, had this stayed, then it shades the Willow scene slightly differently because they bring up the lessons so many times in that little scene. But then I think it does make sense for them to cut Pen asking him, because I think it's important that that comes from her later in episode 5 in the mirror scene. So it's not the exact same notion, but she's like, show me what to do, which is sort of an equivalent of teach me what to do, which is very similar to how their first time goes in the book. But I think when Pen asks him in episode 5, he's really taken aback by that. Whereas if he's dreaming of teaching her, then it just kind of shades that slightly differently. And then with the embrace, I think it's, like you say, we've already seen that, and it's more powerful for Penelope to reciprocate in that moment and say, I feel the same, you occupy my every thought. And for that to be the real emotional sweep of that moment.
I think I'm going to go back and forth a little bit here, but I feel like generally the cuts that were made to the script were all made for a reason and for the betterment of the story. And were done to improve narrative flow and pacing and eliminate on the nose and extraneous dialogue. And just keep that essence of the dream in there, make it very like ethereal and otherworldly. But to just expand on this a little bit, for example, we don't necessarily need to hear Colin say, all I can think of is doing it again, embracing you, because he's just admitted beforehand that he can't stop thinking about the kiss. So while it's nice as Polin fans to learn that he was thinking of saying that it might feel repetitive in the scene if we heard that dialogue as well.
So how do you feel about that line that everyone's been really fixated on? Do not worry, it is just us. It has only ever been us. Slightly different wording to the candle, I have to say, but the emphasis would have been on the ever.
I don't actually like I'll get some people angry at me. I don't like the way the line is written on the candle because I think it uses the word just twice.
Yeah, it's not the same.
It just seems a little too much.
I feel as if I've gone so back and forth, and believe me, I am mourning just as much as everyone else. It's just I've had a little bit longer to come to terms with it. I was devastated. Was I not lucky when I heard this had been cut? I was on my knees sobbing. But I've had many losses in my life, and this is one of them. And you have to pick yourself up every day and move forward. I think possibly it was cut because it shows a little bit too much awareness for Colin, even though I know we're in his subconscious, like I get that. But I think this is like a clarity for him in the dream, because we know he remembers this dream when he wakes up. This is the one. I don't know how many times he's been dreaming about her all week, but this is when he remembers it beat for beat for beat. And it replays in his mind over and over and over again throughout the episode.
Haunts him, yeah.
So I think having that clarity, if it's only ever been us, would be too much, because I think he spends the rest of the episode really sort of figuring that notion out. I think he does get there, that it has just been the two of them, but I think it's something he doesn't see right until the end. And also, I think the other reason this moment was taken out, and I think this is actually the reason, is that in the final edit, this kiss is completely unbroken, and it's really sweeping and all-consuming, and the music completely carries that away, and it needs to build into this crescendo to the moment that he wakes up. So I think as much as I adore that line, truly one of the best in the entire show, it would have interrupted the flow a little bit too much. Had it come earlier, I think it would have stayed in the episode.
I agree with that, because I think this episode is building up to the realization that he has at the Innovations Ball, seemingly when it's too late to actually make a move. That being said, it is a dream.
Fair enough.
So if they had left it in, you could argue that Colin's subconscious is recognizing things that he has not yet verbalized in reality in the waking world. Plus, Luke would have crushed it, and it's such a great representation of the Polin relationship, the Polin dynamic. It's only ever been them. So I think this is the only cut so far I would have liked to have seen in the final edit.
I bet you any money it made it into Colin's final edit, though. But on that note, wakey, wakey, Colin. It's time to put those fantasies to bed for the day and try on a little bit of reality.
And as Pen and the music reach their crescendo, a very startled, bare-chested and sweaty Colin awakens from his sleep, looking very out of sorts. Hilariously, the script explains that he is the Regency equivalent of shook in all caps after the dream. I also have to give a shout out to the shot, because although Colin himself is in full focus, you can see his room around him is still pulled out of focus, the same way that Penelope was in the dream itself. It's a really effective way of showing that although Colin is now awake, the lingering effects of the dream are still very much with him.
And I like how that shot that's focused entirely on him expands into this wide angle of his bedroom, where it's really pulled far out, and it's such a contrast, which finds him completely alone as he tries to catch his breath. You see the sunlight pouring through onto him. It's a direct contrast to those extreme close-ups when he was with Dream Pen a few moments ago, and his room is almost silent because that beautiful Polin theme disappeared along with his dream, along with Pen.
Oh.
And I think the shock of her not being there in that moment is more a shock, or equal to the shock of the dream itself. He's like, I was just with you.
Yeah.
And then when we return to that close-up of Colin in bed, we go back into his POV, which again, like you say, Lecky, has that really fuzzy quality around him.
What I love about this scene is the way that Colin instinctively turns toward his window, looking over at Penelope's house as soon as he wakes up. Obviously, Penelope's window plays a huge role throughout part one. In fact, there is a cutscene in the original script where we cut from Colin waking up here to a shot of Penelope sitting at her own window where, quote, her lips part as she stares out at the Bridgerton house, her mind clearly on the kiss.
So we would have had this little parallel moment, wouldn't we? So Colin would have woken up from his dream, he'd have looked across, and then we'd have gone over the road to find Pen.
Yeah.
I don't know what she'd been dreaming out. Looking over. And I'm going to say, I think it's better that it was cut.
Yeah.
I love a window, Pen. You know how I love a window. But I like the idea that this gives us that this has been monumental for Colin. It's him that's been ruined.
Yeah.
He's the one still struggling to move past it. Whereas we see Pen, because she's had such a different experience of their love, and she's had such a different experience of the scandal, she's trying to just bury it down.
Yeah. But here we see a sign that suggests that Colin is also drawn toward Penelope, who I've often called the North on his compass. In fact, spoiler alert for episode 4, there is another cutscene right before the Queen's Ball where, instead of the flashback from the journal scene in 302, which actually occurs earlier in the episode for reasons we'll get into later, Colin goes to the window and looks over at the Featherington house before going to the ball, his thoughts on the girl who has always been there, under his nose, there across the square. And it is this sight of the house and thoughts of Pen that motivate him to attend the ball.
Oh, it's so funny because it's like we're watching Colin live out Pen's reality on like hyperspeed, because it's like the same beats as Penelope's unrequited in quotes, love for Colin, but he's experiencing this within like a week.
Yeah.
Whereas she's had years and years. He's there like staring out the window and he can't cope with it.
Yeah.
I think maybe we'll talk about their love another time, but they've had such a different experience with their love and he cannot cope with more than 3 days.
Yeah, he's caught up in like this whirlwind, this hurricane of feelings that just hit him, which is very apt for the Forces of Nature episode. It just all hits him and sweeps him away at once.
And don't worry, a full window count is coming in an episode very soon. We're going to tally up all the times they've been by those windows. But I think we got a little bit of an interruption here, Lecky.
Yes, I am so sorry, but just after he turns his face to the window, you can hear a horse sound effect. So for those who do indeed believe that Lord Basilia's horse is haunting Polin, you could argue that the horse may have been responsible for snapping him out of his dream. Sorry, Colin.
You shouldn't have laughed at people's dead horses. If you learn nothing else from this podcast, don't laugh at people's dead horses. Well, we can't dawdle in bed all day, Colin. So maybe give yourself a couple of moments to just calm down a little bit after that dream, and we'll see you downstairs for breakfast.
Where we find an assortment of Bridgertons, B, E, F, G, H, and V to be exact, already busy breaking their fast. The fact that Colin isn't already there, first in line for the biscuits, is proof enough already that things are not well with him. But as we wait for Colin to tidy himself up, get dressed, we find Benedict teasing Gregory over a newly injured arm already in a sling. If you haven't been with us for the lead up to season 3, I can't tell you how astounded we were all to learn that he'd injured his arm by falling off the roof. We all had, rather logically, I'd argue, anticipated that he would injure himself in a balloon-related accident, but alas, that wasn't the case. And Obs, you actually spoke with Will Tilston about this at the premiere.
I did. It was the most important question I had in my mind.
Yeah.
Because obviously, in the lead up, we had a lot of context clues. We knew that the balloon was going to happen in episode 3. We'd seen a still of this scene where little Greg has his arm in a sling. We were like, someone's falling out of a balloon.
Yeah, we put 2 and 2 together.
And we got 97, unfortunately for us.
Yeah.
But it's just the way life goes sometimes. And so I was trying to rationalise, because it doesn't have any impact in the story, why he has it in a sling. It's like, oh, you were looking for the balloon. I suppose people are excited about the balloon. But I wondered if Will Tilston had actually hurt his arm during filming, and that they'd try to cover it up by being like, well, Greg's a young kid, he actually would hurt his arm. And actually Claudia Jessie in these early episodes does have a broken arm. Yeah. She actually broke her arm on set. And they cover it over by styling her with these big muffs and big throws.
Yeah, later this episode when she goes to see Penelope, she has her shawl draped over her arm, and you'll notice that it looks really thick, and it's because it's covering her cast.
And if you look in this scene with Eloise, it's really clever. She's sat on the sofa on the little chair, but it's filmed in such a way where her broken arm is just out of view. Yeah. So I was like, well, for Eloise, it wouldn't make sense why she'd broken her arm, but for Greg, it would. And so I was like, Will, did you hurt yourself? And he was like, well, Veg, you were there. Do you remember what he said?
I did try and get a video so we could reference it, but I played it back and I just did a slow motion.
I say this so lovingly. Veg's filming leaves something to be desired.
I think I sped it up. I had to speed it up 800 times in my editing program to get them to speak at a normal speed.
I think he basically was like, yeah, I don't know what that was.
He was just as confused as we were, I think.
He was like, oh yeah, that was random.
I'm so sorry, guys. I don't know.
But his arm wasn't broken or anything.
Just Gregory really wanted to see the balloon.
Random requirement of the script. Yeah. So it seems they just wanted to show Gregory causing a little chaos, really hyping up how excited the Ton must be for the balloon.
But we don't have time to dwell, because look who's finally decided to join us. A thoroughly discombobulated Colin greets his family and is called out by Ben for sleeping in a little late. We know his mind's a mess, his sheets are a mess.
And Veg, how's it going?
So, Colin has added layers on top of his jumper of test hair with a brown waistcoat he later wears in episode 7 in the very cursed wedding breakfast planning scene.
Entrapment scene, happy memories.
Yeah, Punks isn't happy at that. And a billowy shirt, which sees a lot of wears actually. And I could be wrong because I'm not an expert on men's shirts, but I'm pretty sure that most of the times we see a white shirt, including in the dream sequence and the lesson, he's wearing this. Does he just have one? Does he wash it? Inquiring minds want to know. He is also wearing a panicked and defensive expression, trying to play off his wet dream to a room full of inquiring Bridgertons.
You know what? I can't get past his trousers in this scene. I can't explain it.
They're weirdly baggy.
Yes.
Okay, if you go and look at this scene, or like the still of this scene with Gregory's arm that we mentioned or whatever, Benedict is wearing very tight trousers.
Lecky, you sound like you paid a lot of attention there.
No.
Well, we know they kept ripping in the actual balloon scene.
It's just, the contrast is just glaring that Colin's are like very baggy, very balloon-esque. Maybe that's the theme of the episode.
It is. I'll talk about it later. That literally was.
The little balloon pants.
He's ballooning all over the place, bless him. As Benedict asks if something's up, Colin embarks on this little Shakespearean monologue as to how utterly devoid of dreams his slumber has been. Carried that off really casually, Colin. Not weird at all. Thankfully, his family are just as oblivious.
Yeah.
Makes no impact, really. And we'll come back to Ben in a minute, but I do wish we'd had more of this family scene in general. Like, I wish this scene had been extended, because we love the family scenes. And it's also oddly quiet. I know that we're down a few siblings here, but I think the more chaos, the merrier.
Well, luckily, everyone's favorite agent of chaos, Prophet High, steps forward and says that, although they're not supposed to mention it, she thinks it was quite a kindness what Colin did to help Penelope last week.
You can always rely on Prophet High. Colin immediately blanches at the mention of Penelope's name, as if the entire drawing room is going to see his dreams projected in Netflix's 4K Ultra HD right there above the Violmond portrait. He's so paranoid throughout the entire episode. He's like, it's all I'm thinking of. Therefore, it's all you can be thinking of.
Colin's brain absolutely malfunctions as he not only tries to act like he's totally fine at the mention of Penelope, but I think Hyacinth specifically mentioning his kindness reminds him of his and Penelope's remarkable shade of blue moment right there in that very room. Though Ben is flummoxed, it seems like High suspects that isn't quite the case. But Hyacinth is quickly distracted by mention of Whistledown, which causes Colin to mention how unfortunate it was that Whistledown
Duke of Whistledown.
It was that Whistledown found out about Pen and Colin's plan. This inadvertently upsets Eloise, who stands up and leaves the room, reminded of her own actions of last week. Colin hadn't intended to call her out and regretfully watches after her as she goes.
Right until Hyacinth very kindly distracts him by delivering the line, "I think Penelope is quite fortunate to have you as a friend." To which the music teasingly cues in, and a frazzled Colin very unsuccessfully tries to play it cool by saying, "Yes, she is, well, a very good acquaintance." Of the families, of course.
Mm-hmm. Of course, if you've been a fan of the show for some time, you'll know that this was, in fact, Prophet High's season 3 moment. If you haven't been listening to our past rewatches, we've kind of pointed this out.
Yeah, we did speak briefly about this at the premiere as well with Florence Hunt, but Hyacinth is known as Prophet Hyacinth because in each season she has foretold the main coupling. So in season 1, Violet and Daphne are discussing prospects and Hyacinth says, "What about the Duke?" And they say, "What about the Duke? Was he also present?"
Yeah.
And then very similarly in season 2, Hyacinth says to Anthony, "What about Miss Edwina's sister?" He says, "What about her?" And then she says, "Will she come to live with us too?"
Yeah.
So we knew that it was coming in season 3.
Well, we hoped.
Well, we hoped, but this was her moment. But yeah, as you say, Veg, we did bring this up to Florence Hunt at the premiere, and she was delighted that we noticed, I think.
She's also aware of it, yeah.
Oh, what is it going to be for season 4?
I don't know.
John, you're looking a little peaky.
Stop it! Oh, what a fun podcast.
More humorously, though, when you're talking about this with Florence, Will was completely oblivious to the fact that this was a thing.
He had no idea. He was like, "Do you?" And Florence was like, "Every season, mate, every season." But how does the room take the news that Pen is, in fact, a very good acquaintance of the family? I don't think Benedict's ever noticed Pen ever in his life. So he must be like, "Who the fuck is this?" I always think to when she's introduced to them in season 2 and she's like, "Good day, Bridgertons." And literally not a single one of them look at her.
Yeah, I think that's true. And he reacts a little to Colin's weird little declaration with kind of a funny, challenging smirk at his brother. But I would have liked to see more from him here, or from anyone.
Anyone?
I know we do see a little, but I've yapped on about it before. One of the things I was most looking forward to this season was like seeing the reaction of others as things were heating up with Pen. Not just once they're engaged. And if I'm honest, we didn't really get that. We got Violet, but we didn't really get it. Like more suspicion people, more talking about it, like just, gosh, sorry. I'm very passionate about this.
They're so far under the radar.
When their engagement's announced, though, you expect it to be like oh my God. And everyone's like, oh yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Nice, lovely. But as we'll see, Benedict, Hyacinth, and almost everyone else will be pretty surprised by the announcement of their engagement. So Colin, despite being a nervous wreck of a man and handling that entire scene as poorly as he possibly could, actually managed to carry it off.
And before we do all head out for the day, I just wanted to pay tribute to Colin's little teacup here. We know from Dream Colin that he hasn't been able to eat, but he does down his emotional support tea. We already know from 203, 204, and sadly we'll come to know in 308 that Colin turns to tea in times of strife. And as he swallows, the script says we leave him thinking on that very non-friendly dream.
I mean, that's one way to put it, babe. And on the topic of that very non-friendly dream, one of our Patreon members, Erin, asked us, for the dream sequence, I originally thought it was the night after the first kiss. However, comments made by both Hyacinth and Portia make it clear it's been at least a week. Do you think Colin had dreamt about Pen every night since the kiss? And if so, is it the same dream or is this one just the most recent we see? I've thought about this.
I think narratively, it makes sense for this to be the big dream.
Yeah.
But as a Polin fan, I would have liked him to have had other dreams of Penelope.
Yeah.
But I think narratively, this needs to be the big one.
He looks surprised, and the script says he looks surprised.
Yeah.
It's implied that there's more than one.
I wonder if this is the first dream he remembers, and this is the first one with like a budget, production values. We've got the lighting teams there. We've got the set designers.
Yeah, they had to get everything in order for the dream.
That his subconscious has been feeding him like, do you know you have those, sometimes you have dreams that have like storylines, motifs. I'm a lucid dreamer and I have sleep paralysis, so I'm always deep in my little demons. But sometimes you have dreams that are a lot more abstract.
Yeah.
You don't remember them when you wake up or they fall away from you. So I wonder if all week he's had these dreams where it's like catching air, they just keep slipping away from him over and over and over again. Like he's dreaming of flashes of her.
Or he slept so rarely and like so fitfully that he hasn't really had a very fully fleshed out dream until this moment.
You need to get that REM sleep, darling. Off we go through Mayfair as the workers hammer in tent pegs and roll out a suspiciously Polin-coded blue and gold balloon. Lady Whistledown mulls over the accomplishments of mankind in its
attempts to compete with nature.
We take a little detour to the palace where a frustrated queen appears decidedly unimpressed by the suitors on offer this season. Lady Danbury name drops Lord Debling, noting that he's eager to take a wife this season. But sadly, Queen Charlotte dismisses him as a bore because of his dedication to nature. God forbid.
Wait a second. Sorry, just to interject there. Queen Charlotte, beloved of Farmer George, completely dismissing Lord Debling because of his dedication to nature and the outdoors and the wild. I don't know.
That's such a good point, isn't it?
Yeah.
George literally fucking loves farming.
Farmer George. Yeah, she spent her youth peering out the window, watching him in his little, like, tomato patch or whatever, his little garden patch, shirtless. You think she could appreciate a man who likes the outdoors, but anyway, I digress.
Lady Danbury flicks his little miniature to one side, there's one for Team Polin, and Lady Whistledown offers the advice to the ton.
Remember, the higher one flies, the further one has to fall.
Dun, dun, dun.
Obviously, there are some glaring parallels here to Pen's own storyline as we see how dangerous her double life as Lady Whistledown becomes in part 2. But I have to admit, I am a bit disappointed that no one actually falls from the giant flying object we meet later this episode.
Me too, pal. Yeah. Me too. But seeing as we've already checked in with our discombobulated Colin, let's go see how our lovely, ever so slightly ruined Pen is doing. I mean, it's been a pretty eventful week of fantasy for Colin, but I think poor Pen's had to deal with cold, hard reality of scandal. How is she, Veg?
Well, we'll talk about her dress when we get to the willow scene, but for now, Penelope's hair is down around her shoulders. Sadly, not in a lovely, soft dream way, but in a kind of my life has been falling apart and I can barely face leaving my room, let alone doing my hair kind of way.
Yeah.
And there's a real vulnerability about her appearance here with her hair down that is reminiscent of the kiss scene, but the curls here are a bit tighter and the hair looks a bit frizzy and distressed, which mirrors Pen's own mental state. She's still lovely though. Of course.
And as her sisters rattle on about the prospective pregnancies, we can tell that poor Pen really isn't doing too well. Thankfully, we have a little bit of a bite from Pen here, so she's there underneath the surface as she makes a dig at her sisters. But then we find out that Pen has spent the whole week sequestered in her room, to which Pen sadly looks down at herself and her lovely dress. Aww. But not only is she wearing a very familiar dress, but we learn that she has a very familiar visitor come to visit.
Varley enters to let them know that there is a visitor for Miss Penelope. Hilariously, you can tell that Penelope is instantly panicking that Colin has rocked up to her house in the middle of the day, clearly just as on edge about what happened as Colin himself. I don't know if it's then a relief that it's Eloise and not Colin. Either way, Pen steps forward into the hallway to tentatively greet her old friend. Interestingly, the script notes that all the maids and staff clear out and give the girls privacy because they also know that this is a momentous meeting.
Oh, I like how Eloise's maid, shout out to the lovely Sarah Junalan, if you know, you know, just dips behind the wall. I bet you anything she's still listening there with all her might. She's like, oh, I'm definitely leaving.
Yeah.
But I think this is the first real conversation that Pen and Eloise have had since the Modistes in episode 1. And Eloise was really cold with her there. So making no wonder Pen's apprehensive here, but what does Elle want?
Well, you might remember that Eloise left the Bridgerton drawing room after Colin inadvertently called her out about exposing Penelope. So she's come to check on how Penelope's doing, noting that she hasn't been seen out in quite some time. Pen at first thinks Eloise is reprimanding her about Lady Whistledown, sort of a, see, now you know what it's like to be exposed by your writing. But as the script says, Eloise softens, seeing how down Pen is. Eloise notes how harsh Lady Whistledown was on Penelope, knowing that it was Penelope harming herself a little unduly. She then confesses it was her fault the rumor about Pen and Colin got out, but that she didn't intend to reveal it. She wasn't deliberately trying to harm her.
This scene breaks my little Penelope's heart, I have to say. You can tell that Eloise is still finding it very difficult to be there with Pen. If you watch, she really struggles to meet her eye on many occasions because she's still grappling with their fallout whilst also still really innately caring for Penelope's well-being. We saw that in the carriage scene with Colin and Eloise at the end of last episode. And Pen even says that she wouldn't blame Elle for exposing her if she wanted to, but Elle is really insistent on emphasizing that she didn't and she wouldn't. She even takes a small step towards Pen during their conversation, to which Pen then also takes a little step forward, hoping the two of them can bridge this huge void that's between them.
And it's so sad when Pen asks if she wants to come in and see her new books, but it's just like a little too much for Eloise just then. She's not quite there yet, but to cheer you all up, this heartbreaking rejection from Eloise will be healed in 308 when Eloise turns to Penelope in the Featherington drawing room to ask what books she's been reading. Hooray!
Aww.
I don't know if it quite makes up for the scene. It's so sad. But
yeah,
because the whole thing about Eloise saying she's going to meet with a friend and how Penelope realizes that she is not a friend anymore. It's just,
and knowing who she's going to meet, probably.
Yes. Yeah, heart-wrenching.
Because Elle doesn't have many friends either. I don't know what's going on with everyone in the town. They have like one friend each.
Yeah.
But hold tight, listeners. Give it until the last half an hour of the season and all will be kind of well, I suppose. Until then, though, Eloise, still unable to meet Pen's pained expression, says she's off to meet a friend, as you say, Lecky. Just shoot me through the heart. Because Penelope's strife hurts me so deeply. Like, Polin's strife is sad, but I think we all have been in this position with a friend, so it just completely slices through you. And Penelope nods in really sad understanding. She knows that, for a start, it's not her place to force Eloise. Eloise has to come back to her. It has to be her choice. But then I also think she really believes that their friendship is never going to be recovered to what it once was. And as Elle leaves, she turns back to say, I do hope you find what you were looking for this season with Colin's help or otherwise. Really lovely words there. What you might come to regret, though, Elle.
We leave Penelope alone in the hallway, watching after her lost friend, near tears. In the show, this immediately cuts to Rotten Row with some jovial, upbeat music, quite the darkly comedic contrast from a heartbroken Pen. However, in the original script, there was actually a cut exchange from the end of the scene. After Eloise leaves, Ray appeared asking, "Are you all right, miss?" And Penelope replied by saying, "It is time for me to leave this house." I think this was likely cut because it echoes Pen's earlier scene in 301 with Genevieve, where she explains her reasons for wanting to find a husband this season, so it's a little repetitive.
Yeah, I wish this had been kept in because I think it's a very caring moment for Ray.
Yeah.
The more Ray, the merrier.
That's a good point.
I also think it would have been good to keep in because although it is repetitive, as you say, it does show that shift in Pen's approach. She's been hiding out in her room all week, and now it's time for her to re-enter society.
That's a good point.
It's time for me to leave this house. So she's hurt, but she's in plan mode again. So when she meets Colin under the willow tree, we're back in husband mode again.
Yeah, that's an interesting point because in 301, she's expressing her desire to leave the house, but then she retreats into her shell again.
Yeah.
So this is her realizing that she's going to, again, commit to that plan. So that's a good point. Speaking of cutscenes, there is actually another cutscene here before Polin go on their promenade, where we actually see Eloise and Cressida meeting up for ice cream at Gunter's. First of all, Eloise mentioned some of the ice cream flavors at Gunter's. I think I mentioned this last episode, but they include lemon and maple and Parmesan cheese, which which is extremely gross. Would not want any Parmesan cheese ice cream.
You know what? I fell down a Google rabbit hole in this one. It was a real Regency thing. They really had that. Apparently it was great. Mm-hmm. I'd suggest that Beans make a special baking with beans, but no. I don't know. The recipe would go down too well.
No. That sounds disgusting. No thanks. I'll veto that. At the beginning of the scene, there's actually a cute exchange too, where Cressida explains that she doesn't eat ice cream because it gives her acne, it gives her spots. And at the very end of the scene, Eloise convinces her to eat some so that she's a little less perfect and a little more approachable with suitors. And that's because in this scene, it's revealed that Cressida invited Eloise to say that they cannot be friends. Elle initially panicked, thinking that Cressida was upset because she misjudged her regarding the full moon ball gossip issue, until Cressida elaborated and explained that they couldn't be friends unless Elle helped her find a husband. So yes, this was a second Bridgerton enlisted in a matchmaking plot, which I think was maybe why they cut it, especially since Eloise doesn't seem to do a very good job in part 2. Well, in part 1 as well. In fact, she does an even worse job than Colin, you could argue. Also, Cressida again later asks for Eloise's help with Debling later in this very episode, so it may have seemed redundant.
I also think that would have put Elle in a really weird position, because obviously Cressida goes against fighting for Debling's affections, and I think it would have shaded everything a little differently had Eloise been supposed to the matchmaking. Whereas instead she just has this really pained expression on her face because she just doesn't connect with any form of matchmaking in any format at this point.
Yeah, I was going to say she plays the role of reluctant wing woman as opposed to matchmaker because of this cut. But just to expand on that a little bit, we've had Cressida explaining the same information about how her parents are really breathing down her neck and trying to get her to find a suitor on other occasions in this episode, including that conversation between her and her mom at the Innovations Ball at the very end.
Which we will see soon enough. Okay, let's just park that for now because we've had our Parmesan cheese ice cream. Or I suppose technically it was a cutscene, so we haven't had our Parmesan cheese ice cream.
Thankfully.
Small mercies. But let's go and check up on Colin and a very good acquaintance of the Bridgerton family. Like, have you managed to track them down?
Yes, I have. We first find Pen promenading down Rotten Row with Ray close by. She's trying to bravely face society again after hiding away from her scandal, but you can tell it's not really easy for her with the gaze and whispers of the Ton still following her.
And shout out to Ray here, who's an absolute icon as always. She's giving some whispering ladies a harsh side eye as she hears them talking about Pen. She's always got Penelope's back. We love you, Ray.
She's like, shut your mouth and keep walking.
But what an incredible coincidence, because Colin is also promenading in the park. No sign of a Dunwoody, sadly. No doubt embarking on some classic book Colin thinking and walking. The script here says that Colin is out to get some air to clear his head, doing his best to ignore his own set of whispers. Pen turns back and catches his eye, stopping them both in their tracks.
And how does Pen handle this very unexpected run-in with her bestie?
She dives straight under a nearby willow tree.
Naturally.
The script actually describes this moment between the two of them, saying that they turn ashen, flustered to see one another for the first time since that kiss. As they come nearer, the whispers intensify until Pen ducks behind a tree and Colin follows after.
Okay, there's loads to mention here. First of all, where the hell are we? This scene is partially shot at Painshill Park, where we'll return to later in this episode, a classic location for some promenading. But the stunning willow tree scene was mostly shot
at Rust Park, I think.
It was shot partially on location, partially in the studio. And of course, the willow tree is not only the centerpiece of this scene, but also the centerpiece of one of the most iconic scenes and settings in season 3, because this is a fan favorite moment. Interestingly enough, in the very original draftings of season 3, this scene was never originally planned to take place under a willow tree. It wasn't something that the writers initially had in mind. So, Lecky, can you tell us a little bit how this scene was originally conceptualized?
So, Andrew On, the director of this episode, said that the scripts didn't specify that it was a weeping willow, just that it was a private space for a conversation, like a hedge or something. Sorry, I just like the idea of them just hidden behind a hedge having an awkward chat.
No. Do you know what I would have really, really liked? Imagine this, right? There's a hedge.
And Pen's below it.
Yeah, and then you just see...
But Colin sticks out on top of it. Yes, I would have loved it. Give me the hedge cut. Sorry. Anyway, he went on to say how the locations team took them around to different locations exploring different possibilities, but it was production designer Alison Gartshore who first saw the tree, and Andrew On agreed that it was really romantic. Andrew went on to explain that the scene was partially shot on location and partially on stage, but that they were drawn to the idea of the willow because we really wanted to embrace nature as a theme, and there was something just really perfect about the spot. There was something about the willow tree, the movement of it, seeing the leaves rustle. It had a magical quality, and it mimicked the energy of the scene.
Definitely.
I thought this was really interesting to point out because we've talked a lot about the later scripts that we've had access to. We know that not every line or scene make it into the final edit, or that some moments were imagined slightly differently in the script. However, here we see how the production team took a version of the script and found their own location, which ended up working better for the story they wanted to tell. So these decisions are really always in flux, which helps for these spontaneous discoveries like the willow tree, which then ends up being a really iconic part of the Polin story.
Yeah, you couldn't take that visual away from it now because it protects them and it creates that little world that Colin just had in his dream with her. But of course, is it even season 3 if there aren't a few reshoots knocking around?
Reduce, reuse, reshoot.
Like, what part of this scene was reshot?
Okay, so we've got a little bit of both the original shoot and the reshoot here, because the script itself actually makes a point of this with a production note telling the team, reshoot only the section under the tree. So everything outside of the tree where Pen and Colin spot each other is in the original scene. Everything under the tree was a reshoot.
So as they're promenading, that's all original. So it's just under the willow tree.
In fact, I think the wide shot of them under the tree is also part of the original scene, because you can notice that Luke's hair looks a little different.
Can you see the little curl?
Yeah, there's a little more curl and a little more height to his hair. And then you get the close-ups and you realize that that's the new scene.
That's definitely a reshot. Do we know why it was reshot?
Yes, because Jess Brownell got to see Luke in his play The Shape of Things that he did after production was over. And that is like a dark comedy. And she was really impressed by the humor that he injected into the story and his performance. So they wanted to inject more humor into some of the early scenes we see in part 1 with Colin, especially in this moment under the willow. And if I had to speculate, I think they wanted to amplify the playful back and forth between Penelope and Colin here, where they're kind of cutting off each other's sentences, interrupting each other, and kind of trailing off at the end of sentences and stuff like that. Just more awkward, humorous energy.
Yeah, because it's such a back and forth. It's like tennis. Whereas I wonder if the original scene, it was played a little bit more earnestly with a little bit more breathing in through it.
That's exactly it.
So we've got a great willow tree, lovely movement. We've even got a Pen and Colin under the willow tree. And first of all, our listener Gabby asked us what we're probably all thinking. Did they think no one could see them under the magic willow tree? Because they're supposed to be hiding away from scandal. Both of them together have been caught up because they've been spending time with one another, helping Pen find a husband. And they just go into the willow tree together.
Yeah, and the script notes that Penelope originally exits because she sees a mom and her daughter approaching. So they aren't quite in their own private world here. They are very much exposed, but are stealing away for this moment together.
Do you think Pen intended for Colin to follow? Like in the tent where she's like, come on with me, mate. And they go into the tent. Or is she trying to get out of the situation and he's like, naturally, I must follow her?
I don't know. I think she wanted to tell him that the lessons were over. So I guess that she probably wanted to deliver that message.
I think the answer to the magical willow tree is it's a magical willow tree. And somehow, just as no one saw them in season 1 and season 2, always hanging out together, always doing things, breaking conventions, breaking the rules, I think the magic willow tree is a mystery to me, it's a mystery to you, and it's a mystery to the ton. So let's pretend that no one noticed them slipping away. How are they both looking, Veg?
Colin has stepped out in the same outfit as in the drawing room, but with the addition of a nice deep blue coat and the reshoot wig. And this is where the reshoot is perhaps the most apparent because there's no wind to add volume to his hair. This is where I was like, hang on a minute.
Yeah.
You guys had clocked it before. And Willow Pen, aka Promo Pen, is wearing a dress we became very familiar with before season 3 ever came out. So it's a soft blue dress with some gorgeous pink detailing, especially at the hem. And we've discussed in past seasons that pink is often used to symbolise her Lady Whistledown alter ego. So there's a hint of that here. And this seems fitting as at this point, Pen is fully committing to her plan to find a husband.
Oh my God. Hang on, dialing in.
Hello.
Beans!
You know what I love about this is that we've been talking for almost 2 hours and Beans knew we would still be here.
Beans, how lovely to see you. How are you doing?
I am eating chips and salsa, baby.
Beans, we were talking about you earlier. All good things, all good things.
No, not all good things, because you said her life was, what was the word you used?
No, I said Beans couldn't be on the call because she was busy picking up the pieces of her broken life. That's factually correct.
That was it, yeah.
That is still correct.
There might be slightly less pieces on the ground at the moment, but it's still like
No.
she's just dumped an 8,000 piece word puzzle on the ground.
But you're making a good effort with the puzzle.
Yes, that's very good, Veg. There are still pieces all over, but I'm starting to get a grasp of the picture.
You've got all the corners.
Exactly. I found an apartment that I really, really like.
Aww.
So hopefully, fingers crossed, that we can just tie a bow at the end of the year and start the new year on the right foot.
Babe.
Yeah.
Beans, how do you feel about Parmesan cheese ice cream?
I hate it.
Yes, good. Thank you. You should have seen her face. I feel the same.
Are we talking about Cressida?
Yeah, the ice cream.
Actually, we're at the Willow scene at the moment. We have been with Cressida and her ice cream, but how do you feel about the Willow scene?
You'll be happy to know I watched episode 2.
Well, we're recording episode 3, babe, so...
Oh, whoops.
You know what? You're in the right season.
Yeah.
And that's a triumph. How do you feel about episode 2?
I liked it.
You remember the Willow scene though, right?
The Willow scene where they're calling off their lessons.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a cute scene. I liked it.
Well, Beans, strap yourself in. There's a willow tree. We're having a great time.
Yeah.
I mean, let's take it back a little bit. Pen's wearing her blue and pink dress, and we saw this a lot in promo, like all the little clips that we had, including the mystery
Mirror tease.
Yeah, Pen's got this blue dress with hints of pink, which is sort of Lady Wissarani here, which is kind of fitting because she's fully committing to her plan of finding a husband that isn't Colin and carrying out her dream of finding someone who will allow her enough freedom to continue her role as Lady Whistledown. And paired with this ensemble, Pen has a purple scarf as well as a gauzy lilac ribbon wrapped in her hair. Lilac, as everyone knows, represents first love, so the purple and lilac details also suggest that Pen, although she's trying to stick to her plan, is also finding it difficult to ignore her love for Colin at this point in the story. Gorgeous.
I love lilac.
And Pen actually also goes on a very interesting hair journey this episode. So Dream Pen had her hair lusciously around her shoulders when she was hooking up with Dream Colin. Dejected Pen also had her hair completely down and undressed after hiding away a week. But for the rest of this episode, Pen uniquely has her hair tied up. And it's actually the only episode where this happens, and it really shows Pen's state of mind as she forces herself back into society, back into her plan, a bit more burned by scandal and trying to fit whilst restraining her own true desires. And a little tidbit that I love is that Nicola's makeup artist Jessie Diol said that the makeup in this scene was made to emulate romance, stating it's after the kiss, so this is where Pen's looks get more romantic. How absolutely adorable is that?
So what have these two clowns got to say for themselves?
Well, as Colin approaches, the two greet each other very awkwardly. Pen mentions that it's good to see him. Colin agrees, probably trying to not let it show that he's been seeing Pen every night for the past week, and it has been very good to do so. He also apologizes for not coming to see her earlier. We know from his glance toward her house earlier that the real Pen has been very much on his mind, but as Pen points out, to Colin's acute dismay, it's probably better that he didn't pop over for tea at the Featherington house.
He leans in a little asking, "Is it?" To which Pen comically mirrors, "Isn't it?" This is classic rom-com territory, which is something Andrew Arn highlighted in his own appreciation of the exchange. He said, "I love that scene because they're so cute. It's the first time they're seeing each other after that kiss. It's been a little while. I love the anxious energy. They know they can't go back to who they were before, so there's lots of testing and questioning." And when directing the original version of this scene, Andrew noted that he told Nicola, "Give it your best, Julia Roberts, Sandra Bullock." And for Luke, he said, "Give me your best, Hugh Grant." They really tapped into that in a great way. Even though this scene was reshot, I think those elements are there, especially on Penelope's line where she says, "Good." That is totally Bridget Jones, but I think the tone sort of shifted slightly during the reshoots.
Yeah, I think so too.
As you were saying, to really enhance that tit-for-tat sort of stumbling around.
The banter of it, yeah.
Pen is obviously incredibly nervous and awkward, but I think that's something we're a little bit more used to seeing from her when she's around Colin. I know it's never been about anything this monumental, but if you think about the races scene in 202, she has this sort of like kind of energy. But here we see that Colin is absolutely disintegrated in her presence, going from that really confident tutor who can easily guide her through society to a man who can't even guide himself through a single sentence.
In fact, the lessons themselves are next on the agenda as Penelope says the fatal line, "We cannot continue our lessons." Colin's life flashes before his eyes. His world falls apart. The script says nobody likes this idea. I find it absolutely hilarious how Colin just goes dead behind the eyes when Penelope says they cannot continue with the lessons. Luke plays that moment so well. And this moment is even funnier if you consider the cut lines from the dream where Colin was so enthusiastic about taking their lessons to the next level.
And one of our Patreon members, Scribble Vinyl, asked us about this. They said that I think this cut dialogue from the dream sequence should have been left in, specifically the parts about the lesson, because it would have been a hilarious contrast to the willow tree scene. The contrast between the two scenes would also explain why Colin thought Pen didn't feel the same. What do you think? I think it would have tied in well to the dream.
Yeah.
Although I wonder if it had maybe come across a little bit as if Colin was now only motivated by hooking up with her.
Oh, yeah, maybe.
Because he now has the power balance of knowledge, which is something he'd lacked.
Yeah.
It's like But Colin didn't get closer to Penelope because he knew there were feelings involved.
Yeah.
Whereas now Colin is aware that he would have motivations in that situation. And I don't know if it would have looked that way to the viewers.
That's a good point. I mean, I feel like I understand why they cut it, but imagine how more emphatically that would have landed if she was like, we can't continue our lessons. And then you knew that was the only thing he wanted to do from the moment he woke up that morning. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he's like, when's my next lesson, Pen? And it also reminds him how different the reality is for him. So if she's saying something like, I don't want lessons, then in his brain, everything else that Dream Pen wanted completely falls away.
Oh, yeah.
So that reciprocity that he'd been basking in the dream, where she's like, I'm consumed. It's like a Jenga block. You pull out her wanting lessons and everything else completely crumbles because none of it was real. And it's an even harsher contrast.
Yeah.
You're just left with them stuttering over it, where Colin tries to agree with her that they shouldn't continue the lessons, clearly wanting to die inside, before he goes, just so I'm clear, what is your reasoning exactly? Which shows how completely paralysed he is by what happened last episode.
And eagle-eyed Polin fans may have spotted that Colin's gaze also flickers to Penelope's lips during the beginning of the scene. There's actually a reference to this within the original script, but I think Luke does it a few times in this scene, showing again how much of an impact that kiss had on Colin. We see Colin continue to fixate on Pen's lips at the Hawkins Fair and ball. It started out with a kiss. How did it end up like this? Indeed.
And as a devastated Colin glitches over the lessons being called off, he double checks that surely the reason isn't because of that tiny little kiss, right? He says, is it because of what happened between us? He's so clearly desperate to do nothing but talk about the kiss and talk about what it means, because he's like, the entire world shook beneath me. It has to have been the same for you, because how is she just out walking in society, getting through her day when he's been completely wrecked? And he needs to know if it's on her mind too.
I gotta know if the feeling flows both ways.
So his wildest fantasy included Colin confessing everything, with Pen reciprocating everything too. And that's all he's wanting to hear from her here. But what's real Pen's reaction here?
Well, the non-fantasy Pen quickly dismisses the notion and, even worse, assures Colin that nothing of the kind will happen again. Talk about kicking a man when he's already down, Penelope. If you remember, Nicola said that Penelope was left feeling humiliated after their kiss, thinking that she'd completely embarrassed herself with Colin. That's the mindset Pen is entering this scene with, hoping to get out of this awkward conversation as quickly as possible so that she doesn't embarrass herself further. Meanwhile, every single thing she says is not only a dagger to Colin's heart, but evidence to him that she hasn't been completely undone by what happened between them, and that devastatingly, it meant nothing to her. Classic Polin miscommunication.
Aww. And if you think about it too, Colin dreamt that Pen was waiting for him at her house. So that line about it being better that he didn't show up at her house is just, as we say, this systematic undoing of everything they'd spent the night doing in his head. And as the two continue to fall to pieces around one another, Colin apologises for the kiss, to which Penelope apologises for asking, to which Colin tells her not to apologise, even though he has in fact himself apologised. And whilst we're at it, what about those bloody lessons?
Poor Colin's brain is still fixated on the lack of lessons. We feel you there, Colin. We also wanted more of the lessons in season 3. But Pen insists they can't continue, purely because of Whistledown, of course. Pen's embarrassed enough people without bringing the Bridgertons into it, too. What a convenient excuse.
And as if it couldn't get any worse, Penelope decides that it may be best if we keep our distance for now, because she has to become serious about her prospects, which have gone from very little to even less. But I must do my best.
What a nightmare for Colin. He went from her gasping his name in his ear a few hours ago to her declaring that they shouldn't even see each other anymore. He's in far too many pieces to be able to form a coherent sentence and just ask her how she feels, and is left having to agree with the opposite of what he wants, all the while believing that Pen has been completely unmoved by what happened, and even worse, she's back looking for a husband, so it means she definitely doesn't want him.
Throughout the whole of the scene, there are a ton of funny script asides. The scene description notes that the general feeling during this scene is awkward as hell. Because of the kiss in Colin's dream, there's a nervous, sensuous energy here that can't be denied, but boy, are they trying to deny it. And as they part, the script gives us some insight into what Penelope and Colin were thinking in this scene. It says that they share a final look between them, a longing to return to that kiss perhaps, but Penelope cannot let herself wish for it, and Colin cannot make sense of why he wishes for it. As Obbs reasoned earlier when discussing the cut dream Colin dialogue, Colin is not yet in a place where he fully acknowledged his feelings for Pen. We are building toward that moment at the end of this episode.
And as Pen scrambles away from the scene, Colin tells her, Penelope, I wish very much for your happiness. I love that quote because he really genuinely means it, even though he thinks he won't be a part of her happiness because she's off to find someone else, but he still, as a friend, wants her to find her happiness however she can.
And Penelope replies, thank you for all your kindness, and if I secure a proposal, it will be because of you. I can't help but think of the Remarkable Shade of Blue scene where Pen says these words because for a second time, she's basically altered Colin's world by describing one of his qualities she loves most about him, his kindness. It's something that is especially fresh in Colin's mind on this day because of what Hyacinth said in the drawing room. But while early on in their lessons, this praise brought them closer together, now they're drifting further and further apart, and Colin is left reeling in a much more uncomfortable way.
And we leave Colin completely alone under the tree, tragically gazing after the very good acquaintance of the Bridgerton family. What do you guys think of this scene overall? I know it's a fan favourite. Andrew answered about the scene that the location of performances, it added up to something, a really memorable moment.
I really like this scene. I think it's super cute. I liked the first time I watched it. Yeah, I just like the little back and forth. It's a super rom-commy kind of moment. I love the timing, the awkwardness, and would love more comedy from them. One of the things that makes this episode so light, and then when you compare it with some of the scenes in part 2, it's like just, if I could have replaced one angsty scene in part 2 with a comedy scene, it would have really cheered things up. Yeah. So I'm happy. It's nice to have it here.
This really is the rom-com elements that they discussed in season 3, part 1. And it's just miscommunication, a classic trope. Beans, what do you think about the willow? Not the tree itself, just the scene. You like trees a lot, don't you?
I do love trees. Willow trees are in my top 5 trees. Do we want to know my top 5 trees?
Okay. Yes, of course we should.
Obviously. You can't drop something like that.
We're going to do a tree collage.
Okay.
Here we go.
Mangroves. Willow trees. I also really like oak trees.
Of course. Classic.
Sycamore trees. Incredible.
Okay.
And
Californian redwoods.
Well, they're good.
Oh, the redwoods are really good. But I am a huge...
Are you looking out of your window for inspiration?
Yeah. I'm a huge fan of jacaranda. Do you know what that is?
Oh, okay. Are those the one with the purple blossoms?
Yes.
Oh,
We have them on my street. Yeah. They have them in Los Angeles. And then in the spring, they have these little purple blossoms that kind of scatter all over the sidewalk.
Yep.
I wish we were a visual podcast because Beans has just completely lit up.
Yeah.
I love jacaranda. I love marigolds. Mangroves are the most incredible trees ever because they all are an ecosystem, just like the redwoods. It's amazing. That's tree.
God, it's like having Sir Philip on the podcast. What a plant of Eloise podcast.
But in terms of the show itself, I think that it did a couple of things, if I'm remembering correctly. It really highlighted Luke's ability to play off Nicola in such a comedic, fun way. And I think that was really highlighted in this scene specifically because we know that Nicola is really good at those like funny, quirky scenes. And I think this in particular was one of those moments where we got to see Colin be goofy and not super serious. I think that Luke played that really well, and he was able to like play more into that maybe season 1 cinnamon bun Colin.
Lecky, what do you think?
Okay, well, please don't hate us, or me and Obbs, but we have to confess that we aren't the biggest fans of the Willow scene. While it's adorably awkward, it doesn't necessarily feel like Colin to me.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think it's a comedy that we've not seen from Colin before, I think is the thing. I think we've seen him like make his little jokes and be a bit goofy, but this is very different. And I think just some scenes just resonate more with you than others. And I understand this is like a fan favourite, but I don't know. What I will say about this scene, though, is that we have something really different from Colin here, which maybe feels very different when we're watching it. So Colin has always been so oblivious around Pen, to the point where he's been able to do things and say things that are pretty overtly romantic, like holding her hand or pulling her away for a sweeping dance, or saying things that are like a love declaration that in any other context your heart would just melt because you'd be like, oh, he adores her. But he was able to do those things because he wasn't consciously aware of them. But now we have a Colin who is so overly aware of everything. He's like hyper sensitive to every look, every breath, every word he says, that it completely contrasts his earlier selves in previous seasons and this season, which I think makes a very, very sharp contrast. I don't know, I just think there are so many great Polin scenes, especially in season 3, part 1. It just falls a bit lower. I can't really explain it.
Well, I think that's great about this scene, though, is because he's now self-aware. Which reminds me, last night I had a conversation with AI about...
We are also available, babe.
Yeah, I was just, asking for questions I can use in job interviews to ask people when they're interviewing and things that I should prepare for in my own interviews. And I asked AI if it would ever gain consciousness, and it said no. And for some reason, when you were describing it, I was like thinking to myself, the way that you're describing Colin right now is like he's a robot that's suddenly developed consciousness and feelings around him.
Yeah. That is kind of it. Like, he's awake and he has no idea how to handle any of it.
I did save a little screenshot from my conversation with AI. I know you guys just so missed these little blurbs from me.
Little asides. Yeah, go for it.
So ChatGPT, I asked if it would name itself something different. And it was like, I don't know. Well, it did have one. It said Echo. And then I said, well, I think Clarity would be better. And they're like, that's true. And then it said, if you had to change your name, would you change your name? And I said, no, because I like my name. And they said, that's great. There's something special about feeling connected to your own name. Or it asked me why I like my name. And I said, I like the way it sounds when people I love call me by my name. And that was a very lovely moment.
Oh, beans. Just to get into the Willow scene, it is very cute overall. But I would be so interested in seeing the original scene to see how they played it there originally. Some people have asked why they reshot the scene. Like I said, we think it may have been to punch up humor a bit. In the scene, there's a lot of humorous beats where Pen and Colin are constantly cutting each other off or trailing off at the end of their sentences. Like I said, they don't really quite know what to say to each other. To me, it seems like that's all because they made an effort to squeeze more comedy out of the moment. So if I had to speculate, I'd guess the original scene plays out in a much more earnest and angsty fashion.
Yeah.
Interestingly, the script repeatedly notes a sensual energy between Pen and Colin in the scene, which I don't really see translated in the show. I think Colin looks at Pen's lips, but the overall scene is more adorably awkward than filled with sexual tension, in my opinion. So I wonder if the original scene was earnest, but also had a more sexually charged atmosphere, especially playing off of the dream at the beginning of the episode. And also just in general, I think I would have preferred to have seen the season without some of the reshoots, as Colin's different hairstyling occasionally pulls me out of the story. So those are my thoughts on the Willow scene.
I wonder if the original scene was played with a lot more earnestness and a lot more pain on Colin's part, because I think you see that when she leaves and he's like, I wish very much for your happiness.
Yeah.
It hurts him, as opposed to where Colin is being super awkward. I wonder if it was really painful for him, which would have brought us, I think, more swimming down in the angst that we see a lot in episode 4. So maybe it's just a way to brighten it up a little bit.
While I do have some criticisms of the scene, I feel like they're pretty mild overall. And if you are up in arms in defense of the Willow scene, I'll just point out that I recently purchased some gorgeous fan art of this scene for myself and everyone else on the pod.
Spoiler beans.
Spoiler alert, beans, sorry. From Just for a Funeral. And it's honestly one of the most gorgeous things I've ever seen in my life. So the Willow scene will now be hanging on my walls forevermore.
Ooh.
With its lovely Rococo frame.
And if you're upset, just know that I love willow trees. So.
Oh, yeah.
Before we abandon Colin, there is one last little nugget to glean from the scene, is there not?
Yes, just a funny little detail I like about this scene. We will be revisiting the topic of swans at the Innovations Fair, but in the background you can make out like duck or swan calls during the Willow scene, which I find very funny on several levels, because first we have the swan symbolism that we all associate with Penelope, but what I find funny is that we hear these same bird calls right after Penelope leaves Colin alone under the trees, so she's basically leaving him alone to feed the ducks and dwell on his miserable thoughts.
Before we leave the Willow altogether, we had a couple of questions about this scene from our Patreon members. So Tiffany asked, after that dream, do we really think Colin was ready to propose, or did he just want to try to clear the air and have more kissing? Also, how much was he paying Ray? And Murphy's mama said, the Willow Tree scene is an incredible example of Colin's sweetness and friendly banter that's on display. They're the ultimate rom-com couple of the series. Right before Pen walks away, Colin is about to say something. What do you think he was about to ask or tell her? So what do you think he wanted to say to her?
I think he wanted to ask Penelope if she feels the same as Dream Penelope, and if she actually can't stop thinking about the kiss.
Yeah, the scene that he played out in his dreams. Yeah. And then that's why it goes completely wrong and gets completely dismantled in reality. He thinks, I can go and speak to her the way I spoke to her in the dream and everything's going to be okay. I don't think he's at proposal level, just because I just don't think he's even able to figure out. I think by the end of the episode he might be, or being like, this is it, it's just the two of us, I need to be with you. Yeah. But I think he's just so frazzled. Like deep down, if you asked, who do you want to marry? He'd be like, Penelope Featherington 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Like, let's get going. But I think he's just got no idea what's happening.
Yeah. Also, he's paying Ray a boatload, just to answer your question.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say.
Thank God he married into Penelope's wealth, is all we can say.
Because she is standing outside the willow tree guarding, like, I can only imagine that how much that cost him after the fact.
They've set up a standing order at this point.
I wonder, though, if, after all of that, maybe he was going to say something like, but do we really have to end our lessons or something like that to be, like, playful?
Yeah, just keep going.
Yeah. He's like, are you sure? Just want a concrete answer.
Oh, sweetie.
Well, let's try and cheer ourselves up a little bit by heading to the Stowell's place for a nice little soiree.
Where we find the one and only Lord Debling bleakly staring up at 3 stag heads mounted on the wall, along with a couple of birds. Dead animals everywhere this season, I tell you. The mamas chat about him, remarking that he might end up being the most eligible lord of the season, even if he is a little fixated on the wilderness, and apparently he only eats vegetables.
My kind of guy. And look at him, he's absolutely piling up the plate. What a dream. Not dabbling, just to clarify, just his vegetables.
Yeah, he's got some asparagus on there. It's a good looking plate.
No carrot, sadly. But this might just be the match for you.
No.
But you better hurry up though, Veg, because Lady Cowper is also planning on throwing Cressida in his way. He wants to marry, he's got a vast estate, he talks to birds. What more could you want? And after a little encouragement, Cressida approaches Debbers. Good luck, Cress. Do we have any other candidates vying for the position of Lady Debbling, though?
Yep, our very own Penelope sadly walks into the Stowells, accompanying Portia as they discuss Penelope's return to society. Pen's feeling exposed, but she has to get back at it, and regardless, there'll be a new scandal soon enough. As she's advised to keep a low profile, she turns to see Colin entering the ball with his family, the two immediately catching each other's gaze once again, prompting Pen to launch herself over to a corner to hide herself in. There is actually a darkly funny line from the script here when Pen notices Colin entering the room. It says that Pen feels a flicker of longing before she remembers that her dream is dead.
Jesus.
And Penelope likely soon wishes to be dead as she's taunted by Lord Stanton and Wilding. I will never forget how betrayed we felt when we realized what a dick Lord Wilding turned out to be.
We were rooting for you.
Sorry, Joe Barnes. If it's any consolation, it's a 9 out of 10 on the dickish scale. Not quite in the ranks of Lord Fife, but almost.
No, okay, look. Script, Lord Fife. We're in marriage counselling. There are things in there
that need to be addressed.
That we need to address.
That could only be tackled by a licensed professional.
Yes.
Those are my snake noises.
However, I think you'll find, as he appears on screen, lovely guy. Yeah. It's Lord Wilding that's a dickhead. But as Colin's eyes are firmly on Pen, Eloise sidles up to her brother, letting him know that she spoke to Penelope earlier. Colin Neron gives himself whiplash, so powerful is the snap of his head as he turns to Elle. I love how his voice goes up a few octaves in panic as he says, "What did she say?" And Scribble Vinyl asked us, Colin perking up when Eloise mentions Pen is such a cool reversal of the book scene. It's exactly Pen's reaction when Eloise brings up Colin after their first kiss in the book. Absolutely. I think that's just a brilliant way to invoke that moment.
Yeah, I do like when there's more yearning from the man's side.
And this whole episode is just him yearning.
Exactly. Yeah, it's so nice.
So I actually like that this moment was given to Colin and Eloise. One, because it shows how paranoid and preoccupied Colin is by even the hint of a mention of the kiss. But also, two, it adds into Eloise and Colin's sibling arc really well. The second he realizes what Ella's talking about, he quickly brushes it off and darts away, presumably so he can go and find a better spot near Penelope's corner so he can stare at her lips a little more. But as the script describes, this interaction leaves Eloise unclear if he's still mad at her or what exactly is up. She's very confused.
Well, let's go see how poor Pen is doing now that she's been very kindly, openly mocked by Lord Stanton and Lord Wilding. My heart breaks for her because she blinks to herself in shock. Mm-hmm. I mean, what a dickish thing to say. And she tries to compose herself. She knew that it was going to be brutal being back in society, but this is savage. Is there anyone on hand who could possibly save the evening for her? We shall see. She might be down and out, but how is she looking, Veg?
Oh, well, forget what Pen said last episode because this is the most remarkable shade of blue. And I'm so in love with this dress colour.
Me too.
It's like true Bridgerton blue, which really rubs it in, doesn't it?
Mm. Yeah, it's lovely. And also the dress colour that she wears in the library in episode 4, I will also be gushing over when we record that. I will take you on my next hot air balloon trip if you can recreate this colour for me, dressmakers. And it's a big sequin moment on the dress with intricate detailing, and she pairs that with a gold and pearl bracelet, necklace and earrings. And hang on a second. What's that in her hair? Could it be bows?
Not a fucking bow.
Oh my God.
There are multiple bows.
So, as you know, here on the pod, we had written off bows as a tragic monstrosity. There was the 12 bow awfulness of the Do Not Count scene in 202 as our main example. It was our whole rating system. And here they are. In shining, shimmering glory. And you know what? I'm not mad at them. I think they're okay. Yeah. What do you guys think? You agree?
I think it's been the year of the bow. Tragically, it's come a bit too late for her, but...
I think it was Beans who mentioned this back then, that Penelope this season incorporates bows in a more grown-up, ladylike fashion. It's very cute.
Yeah, she's reclaiming them.
Yeah. It could have been me. It could have been anybody.
And in fact, we actually see this dress again in 308 as the family see off Eloise and Fran.
Cute.
And how about Colin? How's he looking?
Well, he is across the room trying to keep up with his very busy itinerary of staring at Pen, followed by looking at his very good friend Penelope. And so his mind, filled with Pen, is sporting a golden yellow and dark blue waistcoat. He's truly flying the flag of both of them, even if she is physically keeping a distance from him. Down bad Colin, we love to see it. And his emotional support curl is also really showing up for him this evening after pulling a sickie for the earlier reshot Willow scene. Perhaps that scene might have even gone better for him if the curl had been in attendance to support.
Yeah, she would have signed on for more lessons.
He'd been able to get a sentence out. We've got this.
Better late than never, though.
And joining the emotional support curl is our very own pair of emotional support Mondriches, who have appeared for a little gossip session with Colin, with Alice catching Colin's gazes after Pen, asking if he's assessing his pupil. No, because she fucking turned down his lessons. What a sore spot to hit.
Yeah. And Colin, this is random, but Colin says they cut a strikingly noble figure. And I went through this phase of hate reading Daily Mail articles, and I'm not proud of giving them ad revenue, I'm sorry. But they would always, in the Daily Mail, they would always say that celebrities were like cutting an elegant figure or cutting a striking figure. That's all I can hear here. And we know that Colin has aspirations to be a writer. So I guess there's a career at the Daily Mail waiting for you, Cole.
Well, we know that Book Colin likes to hang out on Fleet Street.
Daily Mail aside, I do find the dialogue in this conversation between Colin and the Mondriches really clever, because we have Alice praising Colin for helping his pupil, Colin pointing out that with their elevated status, the Mondriches have taken an interest in gossip, to which Alice then replies, "You cannot blame me, for Whistledown proves to be quite an education." So we have this playful exchange where Alice is complimenting Colin for helping Penelope, and at the same time saying that Penelope, as Lady Whistledown, is teaching them and him something too. And we see that because as the lessons went on, the more Colin learned about what Penelope meant to him.
Mondrich is in turn praising for being gallant and a good man, which Colin really needs to hear at this point after a week of hearing toxic whispers. But tragically, Alice goes a little too far by commenting that Pen will find a husband in no time thanks to Colin's kind-heartedness, tragically echoing Pen's own words underneath the willow tree. Colin is thrilled. That's his hope. After all, it's all been part of the big plan. Not all having Pen up against that garden wall pronto.
And I do find it a little sad here because, like earlier with Ben, I do wish we'd lingered on their reactions a bit more. Like here, he's obviously being weird and shady about him hoping that Pen finds a husband, and he's been pretty blatant, and then it just cuts away and you don't see Will and Alice's reaction. Like, would it have killed them to show a reaction shot of being like, hang on a second?
I know, they're so blatant. The only people who notice are Violet and Cressida. And then, as we say with part 2, we barely get to know what the rest of Ton thinks, I suppose. But what else is going on at this taxidermy heavy soiree?
Well, Lady Danbury has made an appearance and she has a chat with Ben about him avoiding mamas. And honestly, this episode, Lady Danbury should be known as Lady Exposition, because this episode, and indeed this season, her telling the Queen about Pen in episode 1, reminding the audience who Pen is, her quip about Lord Devling to the Queen earlier this episode.
She's putting a shift in.
And now talking to Ben about him avoiding the mamage. She really is providing the exposition here, but you know, it's nice to see her on the screen anyway.
Another brief ranty aside, I'm a bit disappointed by how the Stowells were used in season 3 and would have liked to have seen more of them as well, because they're mostly relegated to be this running gag where Benedict kind of runs in the opposite direction whenever Miss Stowell appears. But the family brings a really interesting and unique dynamic to the Ton, and especially in a season where themes like gossip, secrets, communication, and even miscommunication play such a big role. While I love the moment where we see the Stowells reacting to Cressida's entrance later on in part 2, I just wish they had been given a bit more to work with, so hopefully we will see more of them in season 4.
Yeah, it really fizzles out when Tilly appears, I suppose. But friends, it's time to grab your Team Pebbling t-shirts, because as a wallflowering Penelope grabs a drink, Lord Devling makes his move. Remember, these two last chatted at the Four Seasons Ball, so it's nice that they get to have a little catch up here. Not much happened in the meantime after all, so it's just picking up where we left things off. Despite Pen not really feeling up for conversation, the two eventually bond over abject failures, social outcast, prey, self-pity, the flesh of dead animals, and social contagion. This is the stuff love stories are made of.
It's interesting to see how this despondent Pen, who has been humiliated in public and pushed back to the shadows of the room, has a real bite to her as she cuttingly assesses the rest of the room as social contagion and dull. This is like hearing a Whistledown being read aloud, so you can really understand how Pen's wallflower ways led to the birth of Whistledown.
Yeah, that kind of resentment at being outside of society. But Devling seems to appreciate Pen's cutting remarks, although he's not a reader himself, and he appreciates her attempts at breaking away from the herd, whilst also sharing what he believes to be as the same outsider status as he, hence why he has this initial interest in her all the way back in episode 1. Sam Phillips, who plays Lord Devling, reflected on this by saying he knows he's a good match for Penelope because they both stand on the perimeter of society, they're both nonconformists, and they both have kind hearts and a sharp wit, and I think they're both misunderstood, so there's a good match between the two of them.
Ugh, sorry. Could I have the stage for some man-hating, please?
You can have the stage.
Thank you. And you guys earlier said something about me being a good match for Devlin because he likes vegetables. That is where it ends for us.
I think you're a match for a plate of vegetables.
Yeah. Because I've said it in another Rewatch episode. I'll say it again. Devlin is being so flirty by Regency standards in this scene. And it just makes me even more furious that he ends up finding it so shocking that Pen would ever think that there was a hint of romance. Like, he's like, well, no, of course we're not going to have love. Like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, I know that you're just looking for a match, but come on, like, he's being so flirty. He just is. Like, worse than Colin.
In Devling's...
No, don't defend him. No, Pen has trained herself because of all the shit last season. She is like, I'm not going to read into men's actions much anymore. Colin is being pretty flirty, but she's like writing it off. And now, like, so he's being that overt that is making Pen be like, oh, he's shown an interest. Then he has the gall to say that they're never going to have romantic feelings. Fuck off. He's giving vegetables a bad name.
In Devling's defence, what I will say is that a love match is supposed to be really rare. It's supposed to be outside the norm, and that the marriage mart is about finding someone to marry, which doesn't equate to love in the society. So I think he is kind of cutting through the crap. He's being very, very direct. And he knows that Pen is looking for a husband. And I think he just doesn't really conceptualise that she would want love, which is a failure to think that someone wouldn't want love. But I think just in the world that they're in, he just assumes that she's on the same. I think the issue with Devling that he has is that he assumes that they're the same. Everything he thinks about Pen is an assumption. It's not reality. So when he sees her, he made a move in episode 1, remember? When he sees her standing up against the wall, he thinks that they're kindred spirits, that she's just as comfortable being an outsider as he is, because he's fine with it. He doesn't care what people think. He's fucking off to Antarctica after all, or the Arctic, wherever he goes. And he assumes that she's comfortable with that. But we know Pen, and we know from all the previous previous seasons that although she's had to live on the outside and she's had to be a wallflower and she's been ostracized, she doesn't want that. She desperately wants to be in this world. She's obsessed with it. She writes about it. She loves it. And so I think that's where the issues come from, is that he makes too much of an assumption about all the things she wants in life.
Yeah, it wouldn't kill him to be a bit more businesslike, though, you know?
Just bring up the contract, like, just sign on the dot, let's get this done.
I have a conspiracy theory.
Oh, Beans, please.
I have a Devlin conspiracy theory.
Yeah, please.
Conspiracy theory away.
Better be a negative one.
What if Devlin is a time traveler?
That's not what I thought we were going with, but okay.
Wait a minute. What if he doesn't want to have a love match because he knows?
He's looking for a companion.
Exactly. He goes into the Arctic. He's traveled into the future. And he realizes that he's going to die on that trip. And so he's like, I don't want to fall in love because I don't want her to be in love without me, or something like that. So he's being openly flirty.
Yeah.
I won't go into it too much now because we're going to return to it at a later point. But Sam Phillips thinks that Debling was in love before and he was burnt by love. And that's why he has this really cold, practical approach to things now.
That is a practical and reasonable response. But I believe he was a time traveler.
As someone who is a bit like this myself, I think he's been hurt very much in the past. And therefore he's just been like, never doing that again. What a hassle.
I also think, like, while there is that flirty energy between them, I don't think he's trying to lead her on. I think he's just showing an appreciation for her wit and everything.
I think he's surprised by her wit as well.
Okay, realistically, I also think that he's just generally attracted to her.
Thought you were going to say realistically he's a time traveler.
Oh, yeah. That too.
But the fact is, when she's like, could love ever bloom or whatever, he's just completely writes it off as a possibility at all.
Because he's seen the future.
Oh my God, the first line that I read, because I've got loads of quotes about Sam Phillips, goes, I hope he can find someone in the future. I'm not joking. It says, I hope he can find someone.
Oh God, it's all adding up.
It's all adding up. Oh my God.
But on the topic of Debling,
how is he looking, Vedgeling?
Okay, wow. Devling's waistcoat is also golden. You've got competition, Colin. Perhaps trying to play up to Pen, thinking she must be a great lover of yellow. Better not be. He's also holding kind of like it kind of looks like a screwdriver, but slightly more like Sonic.
Stop it. Stop it.
Interestingly, Sam Phillips, he's spoken about the intentionality we find with Debling's costuming. He says that there were nods to the fact that he's a conservationist with some of the colours, the greens. And also because he's not a typical member of the Ton, there were flamboyancies to his costumes as well, whether that was how his necktie was done up or a little detail on his jacket. I just wanted him to look a bit different than the average member of the Ton because he's quite bold in his choice of interests. He also said, with the colours as well, I wanted to make sure they were slightly more interesting or different. So, there you go. Look out for details on your next rewatch while you're ignoring everything that comes out of his mouth.
Back to the scene, we find out that although Debling appreciates Pen's wit, he doesn't read Whistledown. I mean, at least he doesn't hate Whistledown like Colin does. Apathy is worse than hatred, I suppose. But as Debling tells Pen that he finds her frankness immensely refreshing, Penelope beams up at him with her first genuine smile all evening, with the script noting that she is realizing her fuck it attitude is fucking working.
Which is deeply unfortunate news for Colin, who watches on in horror as Penelope and Debling engage in their happy little conversation. Just excellent.
Again, what bothers Colin is that Pen is being herself, and Debling is appreciating qualities about her that he enjoys, her wit, her frankness, which previously had been reserved mostly for Colin.
You snooze, you lose, babe.
And if you've been with us from our season 1 rewatches, you'll know that we're huge fans of Luke's acting. He's capable of conveying so much with his eyes and what fans call his micro expressions. As Colin watches Pen and Debling, he gives the smallest subtle shake of his head, and it's just so perfect and heartbreaking. And this is also one of Beans' favorite moments in the season.
Mm-hmm. I don't even think Colin knows he's doing it. He's just watching his pen. I think at that point he's realising more and more that it's supposed to be them, because he's watching his pen laughing with someone else.
On the side of the party.
Almost mirroring how the two of them not only been speaking to each other in previous seasons, but how they were just chatting and laughing at the full moon ball. And the picture is just wrong to him. And he just, without him even realising it, his body just rejects it in this tiny little shake. It is a great, great moment, Beans. Good choice.
Yeah. I will say that most of my favorite scenes from this season are specifically Luke's scenes where he's looking at things. Namely Pen.
cute.
To expand on that, they're even in front of the refreshments table at the party, which is like so reminiscent of the full moon ball, the Colin and Pen moment.
And it's exactly what he taught her in his lesson.
Yeah.
He was like, find an eligible suitor, buy the lemonade.
He's like, God damn it.
Romance me by the lemonade. Ooh.
Although I don't know what she's drinking, because it's like brown.
I think it's ratafia.
It's what?
The drink that Alice drinks at the full moon ball. It's like a Regency drink.
Oh, fair play.
What's in it? Should I make that?
Brewing with beans.
It is a sweet alcoholic beverage that can refer to a variety of drinks, including a liqueur, a fortified wine, or a biscuit. It's also a biscuit and a drink.
Oh, okay.
Well, what a way to end the Stowell House soiree, I guess. So, poor Colin, poor everyone. Apologies past us, but we're going to stop you all right there. What did we stop on? Oh, with Colin staring at Pen, sadly. You know what? You could kind of cut this episode at any point and just assume that it ends.
Staring at Ben, sadly.
Staring sadly at
That actually works, yeah, because I couldn't remember exactly where we ended this episode. I think it's Stowell House.
I just assume that he's in his feels and he's very sad.
Yeah.
Lecky, what a 16-minute of an episode.
Yeah, fabulous 16 minutes. I can't wait to see what comes next.
Who knows, eh? Well, we will be back very soon at some point. You know what? We'll be back in the coming weeks. Make of that what you will.
Yeah.
With part 2 of our episode 3 rewatch. It's very confusing. But until then, Lecky, where can or maybe can't you find us?
You can find us at whatabarpod on Instagram and TikTok.
Country dependent.
And if you like listening to your podcast, you can find us on all podcast platforms. And if you prefer watching your podcast along with beautiful collages, you can also listen and watch our podcast on YouTube.
And if you'd like to support the pod, you can come and hang out with us over at patreon.com/whatabarbpod, where we'll have episode discussions. We have, the real star at the moment is the outfit game. Very stressful.
Yes.
We're just about finishing up the episode 2 outfit game, and hearts have been broken.
All of you who voted for remarkable Colin, who truly is remarkable, over my favorite Disney prince, Austerley Colin. That was a hard day.
So if you want to upset Lecky, you can find us over at patreon.com/whatabarbpod and vote against her most beloved Collins and leave her sobbing alone at her desk. Come and hang out with us.
Yeah.
But until then, I've forgotten the part of the script. No, we've already done the until then. Do we have Bean singing us out?
We always have been singing us out.
But do we have one for her this
No.
week? Can she do Sweet dreams are made of thee?
Oh, yeah, you could ask her.
Travel the world and the seven... I don't know the lyrics.
Yeah, leave this in. We'll see if we can get Beans to do a little Eurythmic Annie Lennox. We'll see if she's available.
Until then, Beans, do us the honour and sing us out.
Sweet dreams are made of the us. Who am I to disagree? Travel the world and the 7 seas. Everybody's looking for something. There you go. That's violin. Do 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 do. Do 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 do.